with wisdom, clarity, and compassion as they weigh the choices that will shape the future of our community. Grant them the courage to put people above politics, service above self, and fairness above fear. We pray for the residents, families, children, seniors, and workers who depend on these resources. Protect them, provide for them, and remind them that their voices matter. Let no one be forgotten, especially the most vulnerable among us. We ask for all these in your name. Amen.
Now for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
I love it.
All right, guys. All right, thank you all for being here again, our second time this month on our supposed off month of the year. But obviously this is very important, and the budget deficit that has been outlined is something that we are responsible to balance and make sure that we figure it out and protect our residents. So I just kind of want to set a few of recap why we're here, what we're doing, and how we're going to do this, and what my intent for today is. So the intent for today, and what it has always been, and in conversations with here lastly with our appropriations chair, and obviously with all of you guys as well, is this workshop is intended to actually like get business done. This isn't optics. This isn't, we're not taking a vote today. We're not, it's not a public hearing today. I think most know, because I've gotten text messages of people knowing that they're here to support and represent, but they know that they're not here to speak today. But we're supposed to get our hands dirty today and figure out how we can best suit this budget and work with the administration so that come September 4th, when it's time to vote, we're well on our way. Few things, and kind of the order of the day. At some point I'm going to recognize our mayor and the administration for a quick intro to the most recent updates to our budget. Following that, I will recognize our constitutional officer, Sheriff Rosie, who I see already is here today, and she will have some time to present. I understand that it is not on the agenda, but I understand that our property appraiser may be arriving soon, and he's here. All right, so our property appraiser, Tomás Regalado, will follow the sheriff with a much briefer but quick comments. And then after that, I'm going to recognize our appropriations chair, Regalado, to give a presentation on, she's done a deep dive with our commission auditor, with the departments, with our administration on the proposed budget, and has identified several details in addition to several questions that this board, and then we'll open it up for every commissioner to engage and do a back and forth, ebb and flowing style conversation. I think by now everyone has seen several memos over the last couple of weeks, but one of the memos that I sent to the administration in collaboration with our tax collector on the $26 million. That was the first one of I guess, not official change memos, but suggestions. And that establishes at least a step in the right direction for, in fact, a lot of what the advocacy here today is, whether it's cultural arts, our CBOs, our nonprofits, our parks, and which I understand, at least in this iteration, we obviously still have to take a vote, but that gets taken care of, and no fees will be added in, at least in the proposed back and forth memos that we've seen. Again, none of that has been voted on yet by this board, but it is surely the idea. And then we just saw a most recent memo yesterday from the administration, which I'm sure we'll be discussing in further detail today, which further amplifies and further makes some of those brackets whole. I want to state and say for the record that we as a board, as a commission, are putting our money where our mouth is. We're not just asking the mayor to figure this out. We are getting our hands dirty. We're rolling up our sleeves and doing it ourselves. Ourselves here at the Board of County Commissioners have shaved off well over $1 million that we have given back to the budget by reducing staff, by reducing vacancies. So we're not just asking the mayor to do it. We have done it as well, and we'll continue to look at it through our September meetings. Again, I want to thank the mayor, appreciate your collaboration, going back and forth, and our chair, Regalado, for all the time that you've spent, and your team's time and my team's time, and everyone that has really dug in. So with that, I hope I haven't missed anything that I needed to set for ground rules. Please silence your phones. We are trying to actually get work done, so we would like as little interruption as possible. I said it earlier, but today, and it's been advertised, it's been in the agenda, it's been on social media, but today is about this body and the administration and the constitutionals discussing our budget. I just mentioned the phones right in here. We already had the first one. That was the try run. That was the example. Thank you. That was a good example on cue. That's what we don't want to hear. But on September 4th, and then our second meeting is what, September 19th or 8th? What is it? Jerry?
September 18th.
So September 4th and September 18th is when the public will have an opportunity to come up to the podium, of course, and speak on the budget as we afford every single year. But today, please have decorum in the chamber. You can do the thing that I know Commissioner Gilbert always does and encourages to do. It's the thing with the hand. You can wave the hand. Just no clapping, no burging out or screaming out. So I think I covered most things, and if I didn't, I'll interrupt and say it then. To my colleagues, thank you again for being here on our off month, and taking the time to come and tackle and face this really important issue. With that, Madam Mayor, please keep it brief, but I know this is important, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to all the commissioners, the vice chair, and to all of our audience members and those watching virtually. I want to, first of all, say thank you to you, Mr. Chair. As you said, we have worked very closely together, and we've met with all of the commissioners multiple times, and we've tried to incorporate all of your concerns. You all know that the most important thing that I do as mayor is produce a proposed budget to you for your consideration, a balanced budget. We don't have deficit spending in Miami-Dade County, and one that reflects the maximum benefit to each taxpayer of the dollars that they invest, and provides the best possible services that everybody needs to thrive and to keep our costs low for our residents. So it's no secret for all of us that this has been a most difficult budget year, certainly the most difficult one that I have faced since I have served for now 11 years here in the county. We've called it a perfect storm of fiscal challenges, and we've made some very hard decisions. Of course, for your consideration, because finally the budget is yours. We've been aggressive in seeking savings and efficiencies to protect essential services that residents rely on, like public safety, like transportation, our water service, our trash pickup, libraries, all while maintaining our historically low tax rate that was set by this commission 2 years in a row with a millage reduction, the lowest tax rate since 1982. We froze hiring. We cut hundreds of positions. We invested in technology. We eliminated redundancies by consolidating departments. We reduced non-essential services. And we even had to cut or scale back some programs that are near and dear to my heart, which were key to our community's recovery post-COVID and have served their purpose, and we now must move on. And at the same time, we've kept our communication lines open with the new constitutional offices. And I'm very grateful for those of them who are here and for working collaboratively with us to achieve this budget recommendation. And as of yesterday, we were able to identify, with their help, $66 million, nearly $66 million, that could go towards our long-term financial health, investing in community priorities. So I want to thank them again for their continuing collaboration, especially you, Mr. Chairman, for your support working alongside the tax collector to return all possible funding to support our county's needs. It was not obligated for him to do so, but with your support, we were able to secure critical funding. Thank you so much. In recent weeks, we held numerous public meetings and town halls, in fact, over a dozen, and we received overwhelming feedback that our residents want us to continue investing in arts and culture, community organizations, parks, roads, and other important priorities. And I am grateful for everyone who made their voices heard, and I'm proud that this additional $66 million enables to invest in some of those key areas, as outlined in my memo. Chief Morales is going to go into this in a little more detail. I'm just setting the stage, if you will. We're going to be listening closely to today's discussion and incorporating your feedback as we move forward. These items are intended to go into the change memo, which will be released prior to the first budget hearing. So we are looking forward to continuing my administration's diligent work to streamline our operations, to update revenue projections, and to recover any additional unspent funds that could be used to benefit our community. So thank you very much. We look forward to working with you. And now to Chief Morales.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, Commissioners, Jimmy Morales, Chief Operating Officer. Mr. Vice Chair, I'll say I also married up and yesterday celebrated 36 years of being a very lucky man. So, but
We could clap for that. We could clap.
I think if we go to the next slide, what I'm going to just try to do here today, very briefly, I know, is really cover, number one, where we started, particularly for the benefit of community who's here and those watching. Number two, talk about our community input process, which, not surprisingly, given the commitment of our mayor, was very robust this year, as every year. Then talk a little bit about in detail of the additional revenue that's been identified, and then how, through proposed adjustments, we'll be utilizing that. Obviously, you're familiar with this slide, the budget pressures we faced. Folks, particularly the fact that we were going from one government, one administration, to now 6 constitutional offices with administrations, the challenges of the fact that for many years the county had used a 2% tax collector fee to fund additional services community. How that was going to play out are all things we really didn't know. And then one of the critical points, for example, we talk about cuts that occurred. Well, a critical one that we've grappled with is that by virtue of cuts in sales tax and things like that, we lost $200 million over the next 5 years from our SIP and capital projects programs, because those are the kind of funds that we get to pledge in that program. So those were some of the challenges that were external in many respects. Where we started, I think we're familiar with this chart. I think these were the various factors contributing. Some of them, by the way, keep in mind, like the transit shortfall, are things we're going to have to keep thinking about in the future, because those issues are not solved in any one year. But some of these will occur, but obviously in some were new issues that we had to face. Why 305? I think the purpose of bringing this up is, number one, obviously a lot of these principles that the mayor launched earlier this year were implemented to get to this point. Merging departments, finding initiatives, using better technology. But I think the critical point is that going forward, this has now really become part of our DNA. And as we do things like consolidate departments starting October 1, that consolidation will then work through to create better savings. Ever since the July 15th proposal, we continue to look for reductions, efficiencies. Again, it's part of our DNA, and it will continue to be going forward. I mentioned community input. We had, I believe actually that was the one at the library that I moderated, but we've had a total of 18 town halls reaching thousands of residents. I believe the largest was, in fact, last night, where over 400 people attended a virtual town hall meeting about arts and culture. The residents were loud and clear about the things they wanted us to protect, and that was cultural grants, community programs, parks, and services for our most vulnerable individuals. And I think we've listened, and I know you've been listening as well. Getting to the meat of the issue of additional revenue. In going through the process, and again, the mayor has thanked, I know, Mr. Chairman, working with you, working with the commissioners, working with the constitutional officers, especially the tax collector on the issue of the 2% and whatnot. You'll see here the breakdown. We've been able to identify, working with the tax collector, excess revenue and return funds of $26 million. Working additionally with the constitutional officers in terms of unspent dollars. At the end of every fiscal year, there's money that's not used because you don't just keep spending. And so there's another $33 million. And then through some of the departmental adjustments we've made just in the, in about a month's time, we've identified another $6+ million. So we're looking at about 65, almost $66 million in funding that can be, that's additional funding to put forward this budget and toward that deficit. Moving forward to the next slide, you'll see beginning, we talk about what are some of those proposed adjustments. We're talking about, and you'll see them here, obviously investing in public safety. That's critical to all of us, and it's really an additional $7.5 million coming out of really the $10.5 million that the Sheriff's Office was able to return to us to invest in public safety. You're talking about nearly restoring all of the cultural arts funding, an additional $11.5 million there. In terms of the CBOs, while we can't restore all of them, I think we're getting to nearly approximately 50% with an additional $18.4 million toward those organizations. Particularly through the strong efforts of our new director in Parks and her team, we've been able to identify enough savings in that department and with some of the additional funds to now restore all of the programming in the community parks. And we will not be charging for any new parking fees, just the ones that have always been in place. So, we know that was a sensitive issue, understandably. And also, we are able to now put about $4.4 million, hopefully, back into sidewalks, pothole recovery, mowing and maintenance of medians and rights of way and whatnot to keep our community looking good. A couple smaller amounts, $400,000 for senior centers and senior health centers, about $500,000, so we can get rid of at least 2/3 of the additional fee for STS passengers. We understand the sensitivity, so instead of a 75-cent increase, it's a 25-cent increase. $5 million.
Please advance the slide.
I'm sorry. Yep. $5 million, so that rather than a 2-cent increase to the gas tax, it's a 1-cent increase. And then, very importantly, given the challenges we know coming with potential cuts in FEMA and everything else, an additional $12.5 million to increase county reserves for our long-term fiscal health. And that totals just about $66 million. If we go to the next slide, one of the points we want to talk a little bit about, because I know there's been discussion about the issue of public safety. In the course of the mayor's administration, she has made law enforcement, fire rescue, emergency management, and other services critical. The average year-per-year increase is 8% in funding for law enforcement. By the close of this fiscal year, we will have added 21 additional fire rescue units. We had proposed, as you know, a 7% increase for the Sheriff's Office for 25-26, bringing their budget to about $1.1 billion. We're now obviously proposing to add back another $7.5 million. So we certainly want to show our commitment, ongoing commitment, throughout now in our 5th year as mayor to public safety. So our last slide really is the adjustments that we're bringing forward to you all as our recommendation. I think also part of the recommendation is, to the extent in the future there are some additional monies that are not spent by the constitutional officers or other savings, we would recommend putting those toward the reserves. Because again, number one, we know there are going to be challenges in the budget next year, and number two, we know that there are headwinds and real headwinds sometimes that affect our community, and we need to be ready to respond. And with that, I'll turn it over to the mayor.
Thank you, Jimmy. Is that it, Mayor? Thank you. And thank you guys for that update. All right, with that, we'll get right into it so we can move the show along. Let me switch things up a little bit, Sheriff, if you don't mind, just because I know that our PA is going to be much briefer than you, like a lot, if you don't mind. Our property appraiser, Tomás Regalado, you wanted to say a few words?
Thank you so much. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, Commissioners. At the very beginning of this budget process, much was said about constitutional officers and their request. Some of that was unfair. There was misinformation, and frankly, we were demonized for simply laying out what our offices needed to serve the public. But like good partners, we did not dwell on that. Time and time again, we focused on fiscal responsibility, which responded to needs with tightened operation, and today my office is once again returning savings to Miami-Dade County taxpayers, just over $9.2 million. These are not just numbers on a page. They reflect the hard work of public servants who are committed to efficiency and accountability. They show that constitutional officers are not obstacles in this process. We are county-wide elected partners. And since everyone seems to have ideas on how to use these dollars that are being returned, I will make to you one recommendation. Use this public property appraisal savings to fully fund Save Our Seniors. It's a program that remains unfunded in the current proposed budget. By doing so, together we can demonstrate that fiscal discipline and compassion are not opposites, but rather they go hand in hand. By investing in our seniors with their very dollars that we have saved, we honor both our responsibility to taxpayers and our duty to the people who built Miami-Dade County. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, Chairman, Commissioner.
Thank you, property appraiser. All right, Sheriff, you're up. So we've been going back and forth, the sheriff's office and my office, and I personally on how much time she was going to need today. Sheriff is going to give about 10 minutes. Is that going, you think that's going to be okay?
3-4 hours?
Yeah. You're a hard negotiator.
She does have a badge.
Let's start at 10 minutes. If you go over a minute or two, is fine.
Thank you, sir. Thank
She
you.
got a badge and a gun.
Go ahead. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's not a fair fight. And the floor's yours.
Thank you. Apologies. Good morning. Good morning, Chairman, Vice Chair, Commissioners, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all today. I'm here today to get the funds required to protect the citizens of this county. We need required resources above our current year's budget. My presentation will show why I should not even be here fighting for most of these funds. But let's dive right in. Article 8 of the Florida Constitution establishes the County Sheriff's Office. Miami-Dade Sheriff's is designated in the Constitution as the primary agency that must be trained and resourced to keep our citizens safe. We are the key piece to public safety. We keep your children safe, we keep your family safe, we keep our seniors safe, we keep our parks safe. The law mandates that the county commission approve a sheriff's budget that must adequately fund the sheriff's office so that the sheriff may properly perform all of our public safety duties. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very important slide. The law mandates that the county commission approve a sheriff's budget that must adequately fund the sheriff's office. So, MDSO budget essentials. In the next few slides, I will show you simply what MDSO needs to operate. What does it take to run this agency? The core budget, our most valuable resources are our people, reflected in the budget, from deputies on the road to civilians supporting our policing function. The majority of our budget request is in salaries. But that leads us to the critically required funds of $93.8 million. To be clear, this is the amount above and beyond our current budget. I will focus on that amount and why it's necessary that it's funded. Again, this is the additional required needs over the current budget that we are in this year. Before you, you see a simple pie chart of which 63 million of the 93.8 million was committed to prior to the sheriff's office. 63 million does not put one more deputy on the road. It does not even buy a paperclip. They are collective bargaining agreements for employee benefits, which we are happy to pay, but must be funded. $63 million in obligations that were agreed upon by our current administration and voted upon by this very board and committed to before the existence of the sheriff's office. The mayor's proposed budget does not even cover this pre-existing collective bargaining obligation. So, if you take the $93.8 million, you subtract the $63 million that was previously committed, what you have left with is $30.7 million, which is my true required need. Well, let's talk a little bit about what that translates into. The FBI reports that the national standard of sworn officers per 1,000 residents is 3.5, 3.5 deputies per 1,000 residents. I'm here to tell you that our current average in the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office is 2.5 per 1,000 residents. Miami-Dade County has essentially the same number of sworn law enforcement officers today as it had in 2007. And life does not cost the same today as it did in 2007. Not the groceries in the supermarket, nor the rent for your home, yet MDSO has had the same number of deputies as today as it had in 2007. That also does not take into account, in these residential numbers, the number of tourists that come through our wonderful county. So now let me break down that 30 million that I'm actually asking for. 12.5 million. Every day deputies retire, they serve their term and they move on. And we need to fill those positions in order just to stay at the same level of service that we provide this county. It takes an average of 18 months of training from the day we hire a deputy to the day that they're able to be ready to protect this county independently. This 12.5 million would cover the 5 classes of academy for next year, as we're still trying to recover from this year's budget cuts, where we lost deputy academy classes. Let me put that in relatively. In October of '24, Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office had 40 vacancies on the books, deputy vacancies. Today, we have 180 deputy vacancies. And if we do not put forth these academy classes by next summer, we will have over 260 deputy vacancies. We must hire between 130 to 150 a year in order just to keep up with the attrition, just to keep up with the amount of people that retire. We're also asking for $3.6 million in overtime. What is overtime? Overtime in law enforcement, in the sheriff's office, is not what it is in most places. It's not optional. These are emergencies. that don't even allow us to go home at the end of the shift. Additionally, it can be major events that come into our county that we must provide special needs for. And as everyone in this room knows, we have a lot of special events that will be coming into this county next year. Formula One, FIFA World Cup, Orange Bowl Championship Games, World Baseball Classic, and maybe even the G20 Summit. Now, you heard me say I'll have upwards of 260 vacancies next summer. Can you all imagine the impact of the safety and security plans of these events? Additionally, as part of the $30 million, there is a request for civilian hires. Over the years, deputies have been forced to perform functions of civilian staff. This funding will allow me to return those sworn positions to their proper roles. It will also allow me to properly staff our body-worn camera unit. Most people are familiar with the need to sometimes get a police report, maybe a traffic crash, minor traffic crash, or a civil litigation piece. Part of the delays in getting those reports is that I have to review all of those body-worn cameras and check off and provide them if needed as part of the request. We have very specific public records law when it comes to redaction, when it comes to timeliness. That takes a lot of effort, and I am in desperate need of properly staffing that unit. Currently, I'm on a backlog because of it. And of course, the civilian position would also help us to support our cyber investigations as we expand in that area. Now, I want to point out to you that the red writing on the right side of that slide, 242 fewer civilian positions than we had in 2004. That is not a typo, that is a fact. We are constantly stealing from Peter to pay Paul internally with what we have, which is deputy positions. The next request is for $3.6 million to replace expired protective equipment and outdated equipment. Now, no one drinks expired milk, and I believe my deputies have deserved the equipment that they wear every day to protect the citizens of this county and risk their lives to not be expired equipment. $2.7 million of that 30 that I'm asking for is for rebranding. This is required. However, I am fiscally responsible. I understand what it is to be responsible with our taxpayer dollars, and I have done so since the day I was sworn in. The cost of the rebranding vehicles, taking the vehicles I own and changing the graphics, not going out and buying brand new cars, okay, is a little over $8 million. And what I've done is spread that out over a 3-year process because I projected that I can only really do responsibly 745 units a year. This allows us to spread that cost, again, being responsible. Also being responsible, keeping our brown gown uniforms. It was not only a nod to our history, it was also a responsible financial decision, as it would have cost the county $4.9 million to change our uniforms to green. Mr. Chair, this is my last slide. The presentation's over, but it's also simple and straightforward. Here's the recap. I'm a constitutional sheriff. I'm not a police chief. And that Constitution requires that you provide funding that meets my needs. This is a local government requirement, not a choice. Number 2, $63 million is a pre-existing obligation. And number 3, the requested funding keeps deputies on the street. Without it, I will have over 260 vacancies by next summer. This should not be acceptable to any elected official in this county or any of the citizens of our community. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Madam Sheriff. And I'm sure that there will be some questions, so if you could stick around for a bit.
I can, thank you.
Anticipate this meeting may run a while, but if you, as long as you could stick around, would be appreciated. And I will, of course, assure you and every resident of Miami-Dade County that I speak for myself and my colleagues when I say that public safety is our #1 priority in this county. I think we all share that. Obviously, now we have to surgically look at this budget and see how we make it whole and make sure that everything you just described is adequately funded. But I think, I hope and I know that the administration feels the same way. So I'm certain that we will figure this out. With that, I want to recognize Commissioner Regalado, our Appropriations Chairwoman, for a presentation as well. And Chair, I would tell you, as you go through your presentation, feel free to, if there's questions from our colleagues, feel free to recognize them as well, so that we can have an actual true workshop and try to actually get some work done. My goal today, and I say this very cautiously, and I know that some will look at me, but this isn't about one-liners. This isn't about talking points or what the media is going to pick up. This is about rolling up our sleeves and doing the people's business. So with that, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for having this meeting. I want to thank the administration. I want to thank Yanka and his team and my team. I think we've redone this presentation like 10 times because we keep getting memos, which is good. And I want to say that I'm glad that we're having these conversations and making these changes before the first budget hearing. I think that minus a meeting like this, we would have been doing this in between the break. So while I understand that not everyone, is happy about having to work the entire month of August, I think it's been a necessary exercise. And I appreciate the fact that we've all been meeting with the administration and trying to fill some of these holes. But my presentation, while it does do that, does go a bit deeper into what I believe are systemic changes that we need to make in our budget. And I think you never waste a crisis. This is an opportunity for us to really focus on what the role of this regional government is and ensure that we're not having this conversation again next year. So with that, I present to you Building a Lean County Budget. This is a limited, efficient, accountable, and necessary budget. So in the first, next slide, this is the executive summary. You saw it in the auditor's latest report. We didn't have time to track the different changes with the memos, but this gives you an idea of the changes that we've had from the meeting to the proposed budget and the different variances and the size of the budget. Why do I think this is the approach that we should take at this moment? Because, as we have mentioned in other meetings, our county government has expanded over the decades, especially post-pandemic. Many of us have spoken to the creation of positions. Thankfully, we're getting rid of some of those, but there's still vestiges of that. Property values, meanwhile, have kept rising, and residents don't see proportional improvements. For those of us that have been having meetings with our residents, one of the things that we hear from them and from the organizations that are used to receiving funding from this government is, well, we don't understand. You got more money this year than you did last year. And the problem is that every year our government grows to meet the funding that we collect from our taxpayers. As a result, we also have duplicative programs and unclear spending priorities. So this is a framework to really focus and provide some discipline and some accountability. So what I'm focusing on is restricting allocations to our core services, streamlining operations and cutting out waste, having more accountability in terms of tracking and clear outcomes, and then funding what serves our community's core mission. So next slide. Yeah. Next, I just did that one. Next slide, sorry. All right, next slide. So, from bloat to lean. So I have been working on some fees and duplication, and this is what I hope to achieve from this process. The presentation that I'm doing today really focuses on the departments that impact the general fund, but I am working on a second one that has to do with the enterprise, because a lot of this happens in enterprise, and a lot of the problems that we have in general fund have been tucked into enterprise. So we'll deal with that in the next presentation. Two things that I want you to consider as you look at what I'm going to be presenting is two themes that we found in this budget that I had the auditor focus on when we were looking department by department and focusing on the general fund. I wanted to focus on going back to our last two budgets and looking at the actual spend and matching the actual spend with the projection, because we don't really spend a lot of time when we close out our budget. My background does it at the school district. When we closed out the year, we went line by line to see who was over and who was under as we worked into our budget. We don't really do that here, but I think it's important that when we look at a line item that has a change that is greater than 10% from the actual spend of the prior budget, there be an explanation of that. And we're going to encounter some of those in this presentation. More than 10% is beyond the CPI, beyond the usual cost of fees and labor. And you will find when you look at these numbers that there is some padding in this budget. And I'm not saying that padding is always wrong, but when it is excessive, it concerns me, because at this point, you're not just planning for the, something that is unexpected. You're actually building some sort of cash drawer that you can pull money out mid-year or at the end of the year. Next slide. So this is enterprise, obviously, versus non-enterprise. We've talked about this before. I mentioned this at our committee, and for those of you who are members of the committee, we did provide a lot of information versus enterprise and non-enterprise. And for the folks that are here, obviously, enterprise is funded by user fees, dedicated revenue. We talk about water and sewer, aviation and seaport, solid waste, and we have been working on those, and we'll present those next time. And obviously, non-enterprise relies generally on general fund. For those of you who attended appropriations, you'll know that there was a slide that was presented, and I'm happy to provide that also in terms of what departments take the most from general fund. They are in this presentation, but happy to provide that information for anyone who wants it if you want to make that part of the discussion. So here's our general fund breakdown. Next slide. Now, I put this out here because everybody always asks us like what the big number is, and when we start talking about $1 million here, $2 million here, $3 million there, it gets lost. But as you'll see when we do some of the math, it can really add up. Next slide. So I'm starting with corrections and rehabilitations, in part because I knew that we were going to hear directly from the sheriff. So I think it's a good place to start. For many of you that have followed the work that I've done here, you know that I have been talking about changes to corrections for some time. And one of the things that I wanted to look at is, in the past, what has been proposed to us as cost savings, and have they resulted in cost savings? Oh, here we go. Perfect. They gave me a clicker. Yay. All right. I don't have to say next slide. Perfect. Thank you. So in corrections, one of the first things that obviously we look at, and this happens in several departments, is the ballooning of overtime. That's nothing new. However, in the case of corrections, this board has approved several contracts that are supposed to tackle that problem. And what I found was overlapping contracts and no tackling of this problem, right? So we have a growth, 56 million is what we ended up having versus 46 million that was budgeted. And between consulting, I put the consulting number there, and the software number, it's pretty high. And those were the contracts that I found that were supposed to be, quote unquote, solving this problem. Another one that was supposed to provide us with a savings when it was brought to the board was inmate meals. This was 13.6 million. And the trays, which is also mentioned in the memo, that's also bloated. So the paper plates and trays, we're looking at 2.5 million. That was supposed to be less. And the inmate meals never brought us the savings that was presented to this board. There's also, in this budget, a new emergency response team. And there's not a lot of justification as to why this at this particular moment. I did look at all the services that we're providing to inmates. You'll remember that we spent a lot of time on the phone calls and the videos and all that kind of stuff and the TVs. Honestly, I think I would just give them a Roku, me personally. But one of the things that we found going through that contract is that there would be a cost associated with implementing the changes to it. However, there is still cost savings in that. So as we look at cutting services for children and the elderly, I highlight that contract as something that potentially we could go back to and find some savings for corrections. I also think that we need to go back to the meals program and see why it didn't provide any savings, and the same revisit what we're doing in terms of the trays and the paper, because it's a lot of money. The sheriff just mentioned uniforms. I did look into the uniforms in all the different departments, and I want to say that while the sheriff decided to keep her brown and sew the patches, in this budget for corrections, we have 1.25 million in new uniforms. So I don't see the need for that. I think that this is a moment where everyone needs to make decisions about priorities. So when we hear from the sheriff and she tells us that 12.3 million can provide 120 officers, I challenge you to look at this budget and see that we could find some of that money here.
So
Finally, ITD, and I'll finish.
real quick, no, don't finish. No, don't finish.
So finally, ITD, it's 3.29 million. We went through the deep dive on that, who it encompasses, and there is also some savings with either bringing that in-house or outsourcing it completely. One of the things that I'm going to deal with in the next presentation is the deep dive into ITD and how they charge for the infrastructure and the service. In this particular one, there isn't, we don't have a lot of IT. So the fact that the budget is 3.29 and it's all pretty antiquated is a little concerning. So happy to take your questions on corrections.
No, I think my question was going to be, and I'm open to ideas from the board, is I like how you're kind of just going through the slides quickly, so thank you. But a lot of the slides have like actual questions that we're going to want to see answers to, and perhaps asked either finance, David Clodfelter, or the director, or the administration. I guess we'll go back to them.
Right, that's why I printed it out for everyone. So I guess just make your notes and then we'll go back. Yeah, just so we'll go through all of it.
Sounds good.
You want to do it now? We can do it.
You want to?
We can do it now.
However you guys want to do it, I'm open to. This is, but I want to make sure that we don't skip questions going back, right? Like that.
I packed lunch and dinner, folks. I'm all in.
And I treated breakfast, or we treated breakfast. So.
Oh, we did? I didn't get breakfast.
Let's do it.
In the back, my friend.
Yeah.
All right. So however you guys want to do it. I mean,
We can do the questions
if I
as we
may.
go through. Happy to do it.
I think my suggestion, if it's okay with you all, is just go through it, because I see a lot of this information right now is provided to us in the Auditor General's report and Yinka's report. So if we can just go through this and see some of the recommendations, that'll be great. And then we could have our questions of the administration as well.
okay. So continue.
All right. Yeah, I just figured people would write down their notes and then we'll go back to it. All right. So the next department that we looked at, which also has come up a lot, is fire rescue, specifically comparing it to prior years to try to make sense of some of the increases. So one thing that I wanted to mention here is some research that we've been doing on the tax collector remittance. And I wanted to have Jerry speak to this because we've been talking about it. In a lot of the memos, we've had reallocation of the money that we're getting back from the 2%. And my question from the legal perspective was, how are we going to effectuate that reallocation? as many of you know, none of the tax collectors in the state of Florida charge municipalities for the collection of their taxes, right? So we've now joined the rest of the state, and this is based on an attorney general decision about 10 years ago. UMSA is also not being charged the 2% that it costs to collect their taxes. So the creation of the Office of the Tax Collector is a benefit in that way to the municipalities and to UMSA because they're not losing what it costs them to collect that. That being said, all the other entities that are charged at 2%, whatever is not used is by law to be remitted to that entity. So obviously, school board is not charged anything. The county absorbs the municipalities and the school board in terms of the collection of that. But the Children's Trust and fire and libraries and debt service, they have 2% collected from them. And the question is, how does that go back? So Jerry, if you could just speak to that, because we spent some time going through the legalities of it.
Yes, it's whenever the tax collector has any excess money, those monies are distributed, like in essence, in proportion to the fees paid by the governmental unit that provided those commissions to the tax collector. So those that contributed would have that returned to them in proportion.
Right. I mentioned that because there's been a lot of memos on the allocation of these returns, and legally we need to consider that there needs to be an apportionment, right, to debt service, to fire, and to libraries. So I just mentioned that for the administration. We spent a lot of time on it. And again, this is the first time that we do this. So I think it's really important for us to get it right. So we did spend a little bit of time on that. And I mentioned it here in fire rescue because when you do the math, you can see that a portion of it would go back to fire rescue. Yes, Jimmy?
Through the chair, Commissioner, I want to just address that. And that is what we've done. When we talk about money going into reserves, we are putting it back into the respective pot it came from. So if fire, library district, general fund, absolutely.
Right, but that needs to be clear because you just said reserves, right? So I understand, and again, we've been dealing with it with the attorneys, but I just want it to be clear that a portion of that will go back into the fire reserves because there's been a lot of discussion as to what's happening with the fire reserves. So moving on to the rest of fire rescue, general fund is down, but the other operations, there is changes there, the bunker gear, the HQ remodel, like I mentioned, the reserves. With the vehicles and the stations, I mentioned the sequencing here because when you look at the timelines of how long it takes them to get vehicles and how long it takes them to make these capital projects, what's in the budget and what has happened in the past does not jive. The budget assumes that you're going to have 2 years instead of 1 year when you look at the time. So there is a potential to move some of that money because they simply can't use it in the time that they're saying that they're going to use it if you go line by line. And obviously, there are some dramatic changes. We don't know if those changes are because we didn't find that they had been delaying these. So it wasn't like we haven't done this for 2 cycles, so now we're going to do it. But obviously, one of the things that is mentioned is $2.16 million for payments relating to clothing and uniforms. That's an increase in the budget of $335,000. The typical spend that we found was between $1 million and $1.4 million. So those are just some of the anomalies that we found in the fire budget. Medical examiner. So I mentioned the medical examiner because one of the things I talk about here is, sometimes things are created and we don't really follow up on them. And then they kind of grow and some people know they exist and some people don't know they exist. And there is some dramatic changes to the medical examiner in this budget because, as many of you know, our current medical examiner, who has been there for my entire life, I think. I think it's been like 30-something years that I've known of the medical examiner's office, is retiring. So as a response to that, certain changes are being made in this budget, including the outsourcing of pathology. He currently does that himself, but they haven't found someone who could do both. So that leads them to get a contract for 118,000. So these are the increases that we saw in the medical examiner, 584,000 in new high-level positions, but no real conversation about the growth and the caseload. The outsourcing, like I mentioned, because of the change in the director. And I mentioned cremation because there's a very interesting thing that happens at the medical examiner that I don't think is necessarily the best use of Miami-Dade County resources. But my takeaway on this one is that we need to review and adjust the fees to match the escalating costs and to look on the return on investment. So I don't know how many of you know that Miami-Dade County subsidizes cremation. This is a delicate subject. We have a legal obligation to cremate John Does and indigents, but that's not what this is. This is a program that the county has had for a long time where just normal people who say that it's too expensive to have death services go to the medical examiner to get these services. And we subsidize it. And here are the fees. So I know this is a delicate subject, and I mention it because I literally leave no stone unturned. But as we look at increasing all of our fees, I think if we're going to continue to provide this service, which I think is a conversation that we should have, I don't think this is something that is in the wheelhouse of the services that the county should provide. This is not something that I consider a core service. I don't think we should provide it, and if we are going to provide it, we definitely have to change the fees, because the amount of subsidies that we are paying out of the general fund to provide cremation to a small group of people who know that this exists, I don't think is in line with the priorities of this board. So there are the fees and the information on the program. Parks and Rec. So Parks and Recreations, we're happy to see that changes have been made, but there's still a lot more that can be done in Parks and Rec. I think the main point of Parks and Rec is that we have to change our mindset in terms of how we do Parks and Rec, what our priorities are, and how we find funding. So here you can see the budget overall. When we go to the specific, I just like to highlight a few. I worked on the Crandit privatization, and that was of our tennis center, which cut 8 positions and saved Miami-Dade County $1.2 million. The zoo, meanwhile, added 14 positions at 1.4 without a clear ROI. And I think we need to focus on private partnerships and revenue opportunities that don't limit access. I did look at all the fee schedules since we were talking about parking. As I mentioned to the administration, I don't think that charging for parking is a good idea. I think it limits access to our parks, and I'm glad that it was eliminated. However, we do have fee schedules. For example, the renting of certain park areas that haven't been updated in a very long time. I think that this board should consider updating those fees, or at a minimum, adding a CPI so that every year at least they increase based on CPI. Because when I pulled the information on these rentals, they are very popular. People use them a lot, and they haven't changed in the last 8 to 9 years. So there is an opportunity there, and I don't think that that's about deterring access. These are private events that people are having in our parks, and we've had a tendency to focus on very large things. But when we look at the shelter rentals, even if we decide to use the increase of those fees to maintain and provide better amenities at those shelters, I think that that's something that would be very well received, because one of the things that I found was a lot of complaints about the amenities. So there is no capital program in terms of fixing the barbecues and the trash cans and the shelters themselves. So this would be a way of providing that and ensuring that that is not coming out of the general fund, but directly from the users. The other thing that I found is, Sargassum is up because Sargassum is up this year, but I did a deep dive into all things parks trash. We spent a lot of money on parks and trash, and I think that there's an opportunity to partner with solid waste and use their contracts and get better deals. I also think that we need to focus on looking at departments and finding how other departments can do things better. Currently, our Parks Department uses outside contracting for controlled burn when they could use our fire department. And by the way, guess who has to be outside in case there's a fire? Our fire department. So it's a simple one. It's a simple one. But I think in the case of parks, we really need more connectivity with other departments and utilizing their expertise, specifically when we look at lawn, yard waste, mulching, and landscaping. So that's parks. Communications, information, and technology. This could be an entire meeting, but I won't do that to you. So this is some of the information that we found. Like I said, we're working more on IT. I tried to keep this one. When I originally did this part, it was 16 slides. I've reduced it to 3. I'll save you all my many, many thoughts on the changes that we should make to this department. But now that it's being consolidated, I want to point out that the merger does blur a lot of the analysis. The 3.1 million, the new platform, there's really very little clarity as to the replacement licenses. 4.13, unexplained maintenance charges. Look, tech has to come with measurable savings. We have to focus on the return on investment. The department needs to stop hiding behind cybersecurity and streamline or be outsourced, is my opinion. I'm working on a deep dive specifically on how much this department charges. I can tell you, for example, that it charges some departments based on revenue and other based on actual bodies. But once you do the hours on the actual bodies, it's humanly impossible for those actual bodies to produce that many hours. So there is some double billing occurring in this department, and I don't think that's fair, which is why one of the things that I mentioned when we talked about water and sewer and RER, which are forward-facing departments that really need to have direct access to daily information, I still believe that they should be able to have those services in-house. One of our favorites, People and Internal Operations Department. Here, this one, there was a cut of 124 positions, but the contracts ballooned to 127 million. So there's a lot of questions as to what the return on investment is there. I focused this one a lot on the fuel costs because one of the things that's being proposed in this budget is an increase to the gas tax. Obviously, we receive revenue from the gas tax, but we also purchase gas. There is a rebate program that we participate in, but there should be an accounting in the budget of the impact that our decision to raise the gas would have on our purchase of gas and when we would receive the rebate and where that rebate would go. So something to consider because as gas goes, we buy a lot of gas. The courthouse payments, as you know, there was a delay. It's unclear as to the timing of it. And security services were very high compared to prior years, so I added that there too. Transportation and Public Works. So transportation and public works, I think that here we have an opportunity to make a lot of changes. This one is one where I think it's more ideology than actual numbers, and we have to make decisions as a board. I believe that rather than raise transit fees, we need to move from full subsidy mindset to partial subsidy and eliminate this concept of free transit. My recommendation is that we charge for Metro Mover and eliminate some of our smart plan dead ends that come out of the PTP. The transit increases that are being considered are in $10 million chunks, right? They've been reduced in the last few memos, but just to give you an idea, Metro Mover ridership for last year, for 2024, which is the latest numbers that we have, ridership was 7.3 million. That is expected to have increased this year. At $1 a ride, if it was not free, and we charged $1. By the way, when I was a child, we paid 25 cents. And we did check with legal, and there is no problem with charging for Metro Mover. that would generate 7.3 million. At $1.50, that would generate 10,950,000. So I think it's something that we should seriously consider. I actually took the time last week to ride Metro Mover on 5 different occasions at 5 different times on 5 different days. Everyone that was using it could pay $1.50. And the use of it was, a lot of people were using it to get to the Kaseya Center, to move around downtown. And I think that we need, just like I said about Metro Connect, and we'll talk about that too, I think we need to change the mindset. We know that transit is subsidized, but we need to stop fully subsidizing transit. One thing is that we subsidize 90% of it, and another thing is that we subsidize 100% of it, because we're never going to be able to get out of this hole if we don't change people's mentality. And what makes one better or less than the other? Why is the mover free and then we're raising prices for Metro Rail? Why is the mover free and we're increasing STS for disabled people? And why is Metro Connect free and then we're charging disabled people more? So at a minimum, government should be consistent. So I'm asking you to change our policy in regards to transit and to start moving forward with a transit system that does not have a free option beyond Golden Passport, which is the only requirement that we have legally. I also did some research on dynamic pricing and express routes. There is an opportunity there. Even with something like Metro Mover, you could charge more on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays from 8 o'clock to 2 a.m. You know that's the party crowd, right? And it's a lot cheaper than an Uber. So I think that if we had dynamic pricing, we could actually extend the hours of our existing transit, charge more, but get a lot more use and be more competitive in terms of rideshare and their dynamic pricing that happens on the weekends and after hours. Like late at night, right. So also, in terms of the routes that we have, I really think that we need to limit first and last mile to first and last mile. A lot of our first and last mile options are going all over town and then some. So I think we need to geofence it and keep it to first and last mile. And then finally, I think we need to emphasize that as a transit provider, our priorities are road, buses, rail. That's our core mission. Community services. So here's the general budget for community services. There's some changes to this also in recent times, but what I found here was just a lot of lack of systems and little to no focus on ROIs. I was very happy when we looked at the grant programming, the information that the folks that were applying to and receiving the grants were providing the department and the accountability. There was some grant programming that was actually doing better than the county would if we were providing this service. But there was similar situated entities that were providing little to no information, little to no ROI. So once again, I think that we need to be, bless you, I think we need to be consistent. I think that the grant format is one that works. And I think that we need to carry that across the board and really require it. We already have the mechanism for it. So why are some CBOs allowed to exempt themselves from this process while other CBOs have to go through this process and prove their ROI? I don't think that as a board, we should sit here and pick winners and losers when it comes to CBOs. But if everyone went through the same process and was forced to provide the same information, then we could make decisions based on ROI. And this wouldn't be an apocalypse every time that we were short on funding. So the merger of these two departments, I think, has more to do with personality than benefits, but we'll see what happens. And in terms of, you know, our ask about this department, I really think that we have to model the grant programming and really focus on the return on investment if this is going to make sense long term. I did add a slide on the Department of Cultural Affairs, although many of those issues have been resolved, but I just wanted to put my thoughts of this on the record. The Department of Cultural Affairs has been an independent department dedicated and committed to the arts for over 50 years, and I believe that it should remain so. The original consolidation that was proposed did not really have cost savings other than the elimination of the director and the sweeping of the grants. In the current budget, what has not been answered is the delay in the Miami-Dade County Auditorium Capital Project. And one of the suggestions that I have for that is potentially an RFP on the management of the Miami-Dade County Auditorium and 5-year funding cycles for this program instead of yearly cycles. So a lot of the cultural affairs programming that we do could potentially mirror the way that the Children's Trust does their grant programming, and they do it in 5-year cycles. That would potentially allow these organizations to raise more money and to have predictability, so they don't have to sit here with T-shirts year after year. They would just have to come once every 5 years. It would also save us in terms of our personal management of the grant funding. We would still be focusing on the accountability yearly, but it would dramatically cut down on the administrative costs of that grant funding. So, since I come from media, I wanted to just spotlight some of the things that I think we should consolidate. I disagree with the consolidation of IT. For the consolidation of certain things if it makes financial sense. But here's one where we spent an obscene amount of money, and maybe consolidation or elimination of a lot of this is the answer. I can tell you that in the work that we're doing with WASD right now, one of the line items that we struck through was advertising. And while public information is important, some of these are just vanity campaigns. And I think that if we consolidate outreach under one coordinated effort, it would be a lot better for our residents. And we could focus on educating folks and not promoting branding. So here's the advertising expenditures that we worked on. As you can see, we're talking about in this budget $14.4 million. This board has worked on a few of these things. If you'll remember, we worked on an item that allows us to do the notices online instead of in publications. That was a savings. So even though we did that, the budget still grows, which leads you to question how that's going to work out for us. So again, if it's about hurricanes, if it's about programming, and now that we have social media and we have emails and we have a million other ways to reach folks, I don't think this is an amount of money that's comparable to the outreach that we do. I think there's a lot better way to do outreach. And by the way, this does not include about another $7 million that I found where we've tucked outreach into other programs. So all these other plans that we approve also have outreach tucked into them with different organizations. So from the Zero Waste Master Plan to others, contract by contract, I found that outreach was tucked into a lot of these other things. So by the time I did the math on that, that was another $6 million. You can add that to the 14. This is the breakdown by department. So again, it's a lot of money, and I don't see the direct benefit. Some of it just doesn't really make sense. Some of it is necessary, but this is a place where I think we should really spend some time and figure out what our priorities are and centralize it so that we don't spend so much money and we can get some better rates. So what happens next? Obviously, I'm going to keep working on the enterprise ones. I'm going to bring you those presentations. I think that we should reinvest our savings in core services that our residents rely on so that we can provide better services. And I think that discipline is important. It's about respecting our taxpayers because the budget is more than numbers. It reflects who we serve and how seriously we value their trust. Thank you. Happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for that thorough and precise presentation.
It was 80 originally.
I know. I've been in all the meetings with our Commission Auditor, Yinka. Yinka, thank you and your team for all of the work and the late hours and all the meetings that we've been having back and forth. So I'm going to open it up now to all of us, my colleagues, commissioners, for you to kind of dive in and I think we need, obviously, we have some questions of the administration, obviously, based on both new questions that we may have, but also based on the presentation as well. So,
Mr. Chair, before we start, one more thing that I wanted to mention. And we're working, Yank and I are working on the numbers. Now that we've made a change to our healthcare, there is also money there because the original budget that was proposed to us had a spend of $20,000 per employee. That was reduced in the latest one that we got to $17,200. We haven't received a lot of backup on where those numbers come from, but just as an FYI, that is something that we're also working on to have something to you before the first budget reading.
all right. So I know just from my meetings with our commission auditor, I'll just kind of get it started and then we can have an ebb and flow and workshop. But I know from the conversations with our commission auditor and my team that there's been a lot of questions around the savings reflected in the proposed budget or lack thereof around the new healthcare option. So if someone, I don't know if Chief Edwards is here or if someone from the administration can just, and I think it's just information. It's not that something is right or wrong right now. I think we're trying to figure out the number reflected in there. So for example, I know that the number reflected in there was originally $20,000 per person allocation. I can wait for someone for David or.
Thank you. Through the chair, David Clodfelter, our budget director, will answer.
And Commissioner Regalado, I don't know if you dove into this at all. I'm sure you've,
Yes.
and you're welcome to jump in, but can we go through the per employee allocation that we have in, and this was something that I asked when we were debating the actual health insurance, both last week and also a month ago, which I'm glad that we got through and we're past the options, we're past the entity that we were opting to go with, so for now, anyway, right? But can you walk me through the per employee allocated amount on the budget? So originally I had seen it was about $20,000 per employee, and then I think the latest version, I don't know when it changed, when that portion of it changed, but the latest version was I think $19,200 per employee. But walk me through that, right? Because in the actual spend for the expiring budget was I think 17,000, and I'm looking at numbers, but this one I didn't have to. It was like 17,000 and change, 17,200. So, and I'd add a. Sorry, just to finish my thought process. Historically, based on the administration's and in our meetings on going through the insurance, historically I think it was like a 13% increase year after year is what I saw more or less. Maybe less, maybe, but that was the average. So if I add the 13% to the actual, the 17.1, it puts you right about that number. It put you're like the number's accurate that I see in the budget. 17.1, 17.2, add the 13%, you're right at about that 19.1, 19.2, 19.3. So that number looks good. My question is, the insurance we now opted for there's a savings, a huge savings. I think, what was the number? Was it 3 or 4%? Yes. Right? So is that going to be reflected in the change memo? Walk me through that. Sure. Because that's when you do that times 31,000 employees, it's millions. It's a good chunk of money there.
So David Clodfelter, Office of Management and Budget. I'll start by explaining, we go through a process every year where we work with the actuaries, department staff, and we develop that per employee rate, which is placed in each department's budget. We started this year's process at about 20,000, as you said, 20,000 per employee. And if you recall, we met the mayor and myself and each commissioner several times through this process. And early on, the numbers that I showed you, I even had a line there that talked about healthcare, was that 20,000 per employee number. And in June, I brought back to you. Hello? Okay. I brought back to you numbers that were the 19,200. And I explained, basically, after meeting with the actuaries, after having the meetings that we're required by the state process, we came to a new employee rate, a new employee number that was a lower amount, obviously, than when we started the process. And that went towards closing the overall $402 million gap. That, what I just explained, has nothing to do with the new contract. So that, those amounts are now $19,200 per employee. The pieces of what expense that equates to that per employee rate are several things. It includes contribution to reserves, it includes costs for claims, which is an estimate. And we developed that estimate, as I said, with the actuary, and the clerk is part of that process, those meetings. So the contract savings during the contract period, and we've established the rate for next year. We went through the process, that rate has been developed, all the documents that are required are getting signed. So the savings for this, for the new contract, will be realized as we move along during the contract. That rate, we're forecasting and estimating the savings will go towards those future rates per employee to decrease that based on our forecast.
So, okay, I'm following so far, I believe, but let me simplify it and ask this question. Is it safe for me to assume, or us, for those that are here, that okay, let me ask even a simpler question. Is it anticipated to see that number change when the change memo comes and we see this? Or
No,
is it-
sir.
No, sir. Okay. So, because this is how I see it, and I guess that's the way you explain it is one way to do it, and it's not a wrong way, or it's just different, right? The way I was thinking that it would be done, and this is where I especially because we're going through such a difficult year this year. I anticipate next year will also be a challenging year, and the year after that, but we are having the first challenging year. So what I would have thought is, obviously, the new contract doesn't start till January, so you can't account for the full fiscal year. So you prorate that, and then to that increase, and let's call it the 19.2 number. You leave that 19.2 number prorated through December, and then I would think January through September of next year, you would discount at least simple numbers, right? Like you would discount at least a 4% savings to that 19.2 for the remainder 8 or 9 months. I know it's not that simple. It gets a little bit more detailed, but for purposes of the explanation here and not losing folks and not boring folks, is that another way to do it so that we can see savings this year? Because we know they will be there, right? Like based on the commitment from the companies, well, from the company that we went with, and the contract being executed, we know the savings will apply as soon as January 1st. Is that fair to say or no?
Mr. Chairman, if the requirements that were reviewed to develop the rate weren't what they are, meaning if we didn't have to contribute what we will have to contribute next year towards reserves, so that trust fund remains fiscally responsible, if you will, then I would say we can look at that. But right now, based on the increases in, primarily due to claims, in healthcare expenditures that are going through that trust fund, we're at a point where, main reason, that's why we came back to you to renegotiate this contract. We have to start chipping away at the expenses and the large increases that have been seen either due to increase in claims or other reasons in this healthcare.
Okay, so to clarify, David, any excess dollars in this number at least, I'll not change, any excess dollars stay as reserves in that healthcare trust fund?
Any savings would go towards reserve, and ultimately, we would come back to you next year, most likely, and propose a budget to you that has a lower per employee rate.
Okay, all right, so I understand, and at least it gives me some ease that it stays obviously in that specific healthcare trust reserve.
It has to.
Doesn't get, it has to,
Yes.
for code or whatnot, right?
Yes, the activities related to healthcare, that's exactly why we created and we call this a trust fund. Those expenditures, that and the revenues that we collect to pay for those expenditures all those activity has to take place and remain in that trust fund.
Thank you, David, and I'm sure that, all right, Commissioner Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly on what David was saying, I don't want us to be misled. It's my understanding that the savings aren't actually instant anyway. They accrue over a period of time because we don't know when the claims will actually be paid. So we know that there'll be savings based on our new insurance carrier, but we can't say that they will start accruing on January 1st necessarily because we're self-funded. And so I think that what he was saying in a hypothet may be accurate, but in actuality, we know that these are savings that accrue over a period of time that stay in the trust fund. So they stay in the trust fund to make our health system solid and keep us on track. But it's not necessarily something that's readily available to us because what we're counting on is the saving, us paying out less. So we're counting us paying out less, not us getting in money. And so I think what he was saying might have been misconstrued by people in the public. I didn't want that to go uncorrected.
And I think you're accurate, Commissioner, to some extent, right? I think, and I see my approach chair there, doing her thing, and I'll recognize you in just a second. I think you're right. I don't think that the January savings we're going to see in January, right? Like that cash in hand. But I think we will start to see those savings in the fiscal year.
We will. They will absolutely.
It's still part of our fiscal annual budget. So, but Commissioner Regalado, I saw you.
Yes, and I agree. I would just say this, David, I think what we need is an analysis of the how much money was in the account in the last 5 years and how much we had to take out of the general fund, and maybe we didn't. I mean, in terms of the money that we have in our account, have we ever had to fund outside of that? Okay, so when you have when you budget for the following year, do you put anything in, or do we just put everything in there and hope for the best?
Revenue is developed in the budget by developing that per employee rate. So in departments that are funded by general fund, that employee rate is funded by general fund, and in proprietaries funded with those revenue. That's a mix. The percentage of general fund that goes in there, I mean, off the top of my head, I don't have it off the top of my head, but
But I think, but thank you for that, because I think the part that we need to understand is every year we're estimating what the cost is, and we are getting that money in part from the general fund, right? And we're putting it in this account. Now, we may not exceed the money that's in that account. And what I'm saying is we need a 5-year forecast where every 6 months we're looking at that to see if next year we put in 17 or we put in 16 or maybe we need 18.
lower.
We don't know.
yeah.
But I mention it now because in this budget, we're sweeping the TIDS for transit. I understand, but we're doing, there's a lot of one-time funding that we're using to once again plug these holes. So I think that for expenses such as healthcare, one of the things that we should consider is looking at the 5-year forecast regularly as we figure out how much this is costing us and what changes we need to make. We shouldn't just look at it when the contract expires, because what we learned from the last expiration of the contract was that it was going up incrementally every year. And we weren't having that conversation, but on the budgeting side, we were increasing the per employee number. And that's something that I think, given the amount of money that we're talking about, we should stay on top of. So maybe we get a 6-month report and a 5-year plan that's submitted, with our budget so that we can look at the projections and compare them. So I'm not saying that we're taking money out of that account, but we are the ones that determine how much money to put into that account every budget cycle.
All right, so Commissioner Gilbert, you still have the floor.
I still have the floor,
Or
yeah.
still have the floor, and then Senator Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Committee Chairperson, Appropriations Chair Regalado. Thank you for your insight and your remarks. I have some general views that I want to just share with regard to the budget, because there's this misnomer that we don't talk about the budget all the time. We talk about the budget every meeting. Every time the county commission sits here and makes a decision, we talk about the budget every meeting. Let me remind you of the times we talked about the budget. Every time you voted on a procurement, we talked about the budget. Every time you voted on a CBA agreement, we talked about the budget. Every time you asked the mayor to do something or send someone, or back when we had the police department, you said you wanted an extra patrol, or now when we say to the sheriff you want an extra patrol, every time you do one of those things, you are talking about the budget. Those are all budgetary obligations. So this idea that we don't talk about the budget, we do talk about the budget. I remember the contract for the reading, education, video, music, whatever you want to call it in corrections. I remember there were 2 no votes. It was me and Cohen Higgins. And I remember specifically saying there was a budgetary impact in the money that we were saying we would not take in and that we would pay. We talk about the budget all the time. We make those decisions. The question is, are we willing to stand by them when it's budget time? I appreciate the mayor, I appreciate David and all of their hard work, but there are a couple of things that we need to really look at when we look at how we do budgeting. So we set the millage annually, that's required by law, but we don't actually have annual obligations. We have obligations that stretch over periods of time. And so our CBAs aren't just for a year generally. Our procurements aren't just for a year generally. And in those procurements, in those obligations, are actually built-in increases. And so one of the things that we heard was that residents don't see proportional improvements in their services, but the taxes go up. Well, that's because the average procurement is like a 3% increase. And we have $3 billion worth of procurement. So just based on what we do this year, it's going to be a lot more to do the exact same thing next year. The exact same thing. And that's across every department. In solid waste, it's going to be, we don't have to add a pickup. It's going to be more to collect solid waste next year. It happens because gas goes up, because insurance goes up, because we build in a cost of living. We build in merit raises. All of those are in the contracts that we actually assign and we vote on. So when we have these conversations and we say, well, why is it increasing? Some of the increases I think that we need to get into. But some of the increases we actually voted on. We voted on the vast majority of those types of increases. If it's a large procurement, we voted on it. If it's a CBA, we voted on it. So it was by our vote that those increases actually occurred. The challenge is that we want to vote yes on a CBA, but no on the millage that funds the CBA. We all want to support law enforcement. So when the law enforcement contract at the PBA comes to us through the mayor, we approve the contract. That contract requires certain things. The question isn't whether you'll approve the contract. The question is whether you'll approve the tax rate that supports the contract. Now, we all have our private conversations with the mayor. They go and they brief us on the budget. They do a lot of briefings on the budget. They talk a lot. They meet a lot. I was the person who said back when, I guess it was 2023, I said we shouldn't reduce the millage right now. I said we should actually put that money in reserves and prepare for the rainy day, because you don't prepare for a storm while it's raining. You prepare for the storm before it rains. So it is, exactly. So it was, we did that, and no one's going to vote against reducing the millage. But what residents were complaining about primarily wasn't the millage, it was about insurance. And we couldn't do anything about insurance, so we wanted to reduce the millage to lighten the load, and I understand that. But our obligations as a county didn't reduce when we reduced the millage. It just allowed people to go out in the public and say, hey, we have the lowest millage ever. Like, that was cool. But now we're stuck here having this conversation about obligations. We'll put all of this on the administration. I don't do that. I accept our part in that, because it was by our vote that a lot of these things happened. If we're actually going to fix it going forward, we have to be willing to be, consistent within ourselves. Understand that when we ask for something, or because we don't ask, we're the county commission, we tell. When we tell them to do something and they don't veto it, we have to allow for them to be able to pay for it. And that's with everything. That means us having very, very, very difficult conversations. That means us saying no. I appreciate the work that the community-based organizations, CBOs, you all do great work in the community. We've been talking about a CBO RFP and bringing it back and evaluating that and giving other CBOs an opportunity to compete, because there are a lot of CBOs that we don't fund who do want the opportunity. And we haven't done that. The mayor, to her credit, for the past 4 years has told the CBOs that they're being funded with non-recurring dollars, and this money was not guaranteed. We've said that for the past 4 years. I asked the administration what's going to be different next year. We're going to send them a letter. No, it is, if we're going to fund them, let's create a dedicated funding source to fund them. So we appreciate their work. Let's fund it. Let's create a dedicated funding source for the cultural arts. But you don't say you value something and then say you don't want to pay for it. And to all the CBOs, I appreciate the emails. I mean, but it doesn't change the physics of the situation. The physics of the situation is our obligations aren't optional. We have obligations that we made as a county. They are not optional. We have to, as a board, find a way to actually fund CBOs out of recurring dollars so that we don't have this conversation every year. I appreciate Commissioner Regalado's suggestion that we increase fees for the shelters at parks based on the CBI. It acknowledges something that we all know, that the price for things go up every year. For us to provide the service goes up every year. That's not just for shelters and parks. That's for everything. The price to provide the service goes up every year. So for us to say that we'll never increase a fee, well, we ought to always be looking at least increasing the fee for the price to provide the service, because the services aren't completely paid for. They're all subsidized anyway. So when the fee goes up, proportionate to how much it costs to provide the fee goes up, the percentage of what the person who's paying the fee stays the same. But if we're not willing to do that, then we have to be willing to say that we're going to pay for that service in a different way. And government pays for things in one of two ways. A tax where we spread the cost across everybody, or fee where the person who's using it actually pays for it. Those are two basic ways for paying for stuff. So we try to divide or devise a scale that's kind of even, right? So, or not even, that they'll pay this much and everybody else will pay this much. If we say that they're going to always stay here, then our amount has to go up. That is not science, that's just economics. And we need to focus on that. That's not going to be the mayor. Now, do I think that the mayor and the administration should do a better job of pointing out, because I know they do this, they forecast 5 and 6 years in advance. So they knew when we were reducing the millage back in 2023, they knew then that this day was coming. So do I wish that that would be more clearly stated to the public when they come and to the dais when we vote? Yes. I wish we actually had conversations about what we're doing over the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years and what our obligations are for 4, 5, 6, 7 years out, as opposed to what we can afford to do right now, because in 2023 we could afford to reduce the millage. But in 2025 we can't afford to have reduced the millage in 2023 because it affected our reserves. It affected our ability to rightfully, give the constitutional officers the things that they're asking. That money affected them. And while we're speaking of the constitutional officers, I appreciate, and I've seen the different op-eds, and I've seen the different videos, and I've watched the interviews. Okay, you all, I get it. The thing is this: the mayor has a job as the head administrator, the strong mayor. We have a job as the people who actually decide the budget. Our job is the only job that actually has to balance interests and equities. The tax collector is going to do his thing. Supervisor elections, she's going to do her thing. The sheriff, she's going to do her thing. The clerk, he's going to do her. They have very discrete responsibilities. The mayor has a very discrete response. She's a strong mayor, but right now her job is to be the head of the administration, the head of the county for all those other purposes. But our job is to actually balance all of those needs. And so while I accept the fact that we do need more officers, I don't know that I accept the fact that we can actually have 5 classes in a year, because I put classes through when I was in Miami Gardens, and it's hard to do 5 classes in a year. That's a big thing, just to do the background checks and all that stuff. But if you need more officers, that's fine. We can look at doing more classes, but we don't necessarily have to do that here. Get through the first 2 classes. Come to us in the mid-year, say we can do another one. Let us fund it then, because then we'll have a better sense of where our money is. We can do stuff like that would actually, and then come up with a plan in 3 years. In 3 years, we want to have this many sheriff's deputies. We're going to actually work with the sheriff to budget so that in 3 years, we have this many people here. We're going to have this many sworn officers. We can actually set out that plan, but actually doing it all at once, when you're the legislative body, not from the sheriff's perspective, but from our perspective, when you're the legislative body, doing it all at once makes us do things in other departments that become particularly uncomfortable and might have the added benefit or detriment of actually making us less safe, because the CBOs, when they're providing all of these services out in the public, in the real world, that's crime prevention too. Our parks programming is crime prevention too. That's crime prevention also. So I appreciate what the sheriff is saying, I'm willing to work with her. She understands this, her team says, I'm willing to work with her on meeting those needs, but we have to work within the context that this body has to provide for everybody. We have to say what the mayor's going to say what she needs for the administration. She's going to say what she needs for the police department, the fire department. I suppose y'all the folks in the yellow shirts, okay? No one ever actually, could you get orange shirts next time? I mean, I don't know. But they got the nice signs up, so also, I mean, they're going to say what they want. Yeah. They're going to say what they want. But we're the people who have to actually make sure not everybody gets everything that they want, but everyone gets everything that they need and allows us to move forward. The other thing I've noticed, we should be mindful about running out there, and this is no pun on the fire, with our hair on fire, with arguments. We have a $400 million deficit. We don't run deficits. We have what people ask for, and we have the amount of money that we think we're going to bring in. So we have that gap and that happens every year. Every year, everybody asks for more money than we're going to bring in. There's no year where we have so much money that everybody gets 100% what they ask for. There's no year where that happens. So we don't run deficits. And so if anybody in the media is out there, that's not what we're doing. We're reconciling what people said they need and what we can afford to do right now. And what Commissioner Regalado is suggesting is that we can find savings in some of the things that we're doing. That's all a part of a healthy process. But the most important part of that process is the awareness that every time you say yay or nay or aye or see to a vote, you're actually talking about the budget. And I've been very, 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 deliberate about saying that to this board and to this crowd, that these things have budgetary impacts. Everything we do. If we go at it from that perspective, that we're actually deciding the budget every time we vote for everything that we do, the budget process becomes not just something that's confined to a couple of months, but we're having thoughtful conversations about it the entire year, and I know that would make Commissioner Regalado very happy. But it also provides for a better informed community. Because right now, we have people thinking that we have just $12 billion to spend. They don't understand the enterprise funds. They don't understand the airport, the seaport, solid waste, water. They don't understand that. And they elected us to understand it. It's our job to understand it. It's our job to be more thoughtful. It's our job not to speak in generalizations when nuance is necessary. It's our job not to speak to their emotions because that'll get us a lot of likes or a lot of follows. But speak to facts and realities. We're policymakers. We're elected, but we are policymakers. She is an administrator. She's a law enforcement officer. We're the people they elect to make the decisions to actually balance the equities. And so I look forward to working with Commissioner Regalado on some of these suggestions. And I look forward to hearing all of your comments. And I look forward to continuing to work with the sheriff. I've had meetings with her before. I'll do it again. Because I think that we can find a way to move forward that moves her department in the way that she wants them to go, but doesn't break us in a way that we have to in a greater way reduce the things that we're already reducing. But we need to understand that balance has to exist as we sit here. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'm going to recognize the Vice Chair here in a second. You hit a lot of factual good points, Commissioner. And I was trying to keep up. You were not all over the place in a bad way. Just you were mentioning different points. But one of the things that and I don't know if the Vice Chair is going to speak to this, but one of the things we did do and this body approved, right, as it pertains to the CBOs, is we approved the process, right? For XYZ reason, obviously that has not been done. But I know the mayor supported it, the commission voted on it. But combining what you said, Commissioner, with what Commissioner Regalado said, I think, yes, transparency is obvious, right? Like for us to sit up here and talk about transparency, that's obviously we want transparency in that. But ROI, right? Because yes, we want to support our CBOs. In fact, I mean, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I mean, my original memo to the mayor was allocating 25%, a quarter of the money secured from the tax collector towards CBOs. But there's got to be a process, and not just a accountability process, but an ROI, right? Like for example, the county directly provides meals. We got the meal, well, I guess indirectly, but through vendors, but we pay for meals, right? The Meals on Wheels or whatever Meals on Meals. And we pay X, whatever that X is. I'm sure Commissioner Regalado has that number. I'm sure that's $5 a meal, $3 a meal, $10, whatever the meal dollars amount. If we're now going to fund a CBO that provides meals, if we're going to fund, I don't know, I'm going to pick on our largest one in the county, maybe Farm Share or South Florida or Feeding South Florida. They also provide meals, different, right? I'm using them as an example. I know that one provides hot meals, the other one provides groceries, but there's got to be an ROI. Hey, we have fed X amount of families with your dollars, and per person, this is what it costs us to do it. You, the county, are paying. Why? We're saving you money. By you funding us, that we're also providing meals, we are saving you money. Now it makes sense to fund that CBO. And the list goes on, right? You could do that for organizations for mental health, for special needs, for whatever the case is. But I like what you stated, Commissioner Regalado, because it's not just saying, hey, we're opening the floodgates. Everyone that's been receiving continues to receive. Obviously, I'm an advocate for it. I put my money where my mouth is. But there's got to be not just accountability, but an ROI as well. So hold, because the vice chair wanted to go after you. Then I know, and then you. I am going to you at some point. Yes. No. The vice chair wanted to eagerly be now, and then.
Thank you.
All right, make your notes, and then.
Thank you. First of all, let me say thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Great job, and thanks for getting us together today to have this discussion. And to our approach chair, thank you so much for the presentation. It really helped me understand more than I had before. And thank you to the mayor for always keeping a heart as it relates to ensuring that the resources that are needed are found, and if not found, some way and somehow to contribute to the overall makeup that will better Miami-Dade County. But I have a few questions that are going to get right to the point. To the sheriff, I'm reading the mayor's proposed memo, and not a proposed memo, but the actual memo. And in this actual memo, it lays out that you are going to return $10.3 million, and that you have agreed to turn over $10.3 million. How do you balance returning $10.3 million with your presentation of asking for an additional, $36 million?
So thank you for that question, Commissioner. The memorandum made reference to funds that we return at the end of the fiscal year. So statutorily, the sheriff's office must return any savings that I make every year back to the county. That's state law. Now, when we were in the process of having conversations as to how we could best manage our budget, right, we asked the county to allow us to count on that money for our future budget the next incoming year. So let's just use that 10 as an example. If I saved $10 million based on the budget that was provided to me by the commission, right, in my cost savings, I asked, I have to return it to you, but can I please count on that money to come right back? And then my ask for the following year would be lower. Unfortunately, I was originally told that no. I just had to return that money, and the administration and commission would make the final determination as to how those savings would be spent. Okay, therefore, I have to ask for my full ask from the beginning. But to be clear, when I had the conversation with OMB, the number I felt comfortable in committing to was $7.5 million that I would be returning to commission, not the 10. That was a high, if everything went perfect between now and that final date. One quick turn of a hurricane that we have right now in the ocean could change that number immediately for me. So that is really a savings that we took care of internally and are saying we are returning it back as is required by law.
Mr. Chairman? Thank you. The reason why I ask you that question is because I'm going to support your request and looking for those other funds to help with more uniforms on the streets. And
May I clarify that since you're mentioning it, sir, Commissioner, if I may?
Please.
The presentation gave an overall view of my current status when it comes to employees. My ask is not for one more deputy. It is to simply keep us at the levels that we have this year, because I'm losing tremendously. And since, remember, it takes about 18 months for me to be able to train them up, I have to have them in the pipeline or my numbers go down. So I'm not asking. I thank Commissioner Gilbert for those comments, because it is important. We can plan together, everyone at the table, for future increase in deputies. I just wanted this commission to understand where we're at today and how much it hurts me to lose those deputies if I don't have those classes to replace them.
I understand that, but you understand the position we're in. You know, you're
course.
asking for more money, and in the memo, you're saying you're giving back more money for. So thank you very much for the clarity. So my position is simply this. You know, the majority of my district is inside of the unincorporated area, and I support community policing, and I support the neighborhood resource officers, and I need more of them in my district. Matter of fact, the county needs more of them because that's how we reduce the prison to pipeline numbers, right? So that is the reason why I am standing here saying, you know, I'm going to be supportive of your request, and I'm going to help you identify those legally relatively available funds. However, my next question is, there was a question, and maybe this is to the administration, there was a question about this Red Speed Fund, monies that come back or monies that are going to be geared towards the sheriff's office or to the commission. Can someone clarify that from the administration?
Through the chair. You can go together. David Clodfelter and Ryan LaFarga. Okay.
David Clodfelter, OMB. The question regarding Red Speed, is it the use, what it can be used for?
Yeah, the money. How
So-
much do we begin with? How much do we have? How much are we getting with our percentage? And the next question is, what can we legally designate those funds for?
So it's about $5 million, and what can legally be used for is school crossing guard related activities. It cannot be used for police operations.
Is that based on state law, or I'm seeing there's a conversation happening? Hold on.
So just to clarify, I'm not talking about the board's portion, but I'm talking about the other portion, about what it can be used for, with.
What's the board's portion?
David, do you have the state law so you could, because it's very specific in state law. We have to follow those guidelines. We can't deviate from that.
Okay, if you give me a sec, I'll get the details with the state law and how it's broken down.
David, while they're working on that, I have a follow-up question, and to the county attorney. I'm going to request legislation at this moment to create a CBO trust fund to be funded in part by the creation of a percentage fee to be incorporated into contracts similar to the UAP and IG fees. Thank you. And Namada, can you please come up to the podium in a few seconds, because I'm going to ask you about this. I'm requesting that legislation be created to create a CBO trust fund to be funded in part by the creation of a percentage fee to be incorporated into all contracts similar to UAP and IG fees. Secondly, the fees will be incorporated into all contracts unless legally prohibited by funding source. Namada, can you explain to this board the UAP and how that works, and how much money do we collect in that process, and how much have we collected this past year?
Definitely. Thank you, Commissioner, through the chair. Namita Upal, Director for Procurement. Commissioner, the way the UAP ordinance was adopted by the board, I think around 2002 or 3 timeframe, what it does is it allows all contracts where funding is not federal, as long as there's no restriction on the funding, we include 2% deduction, which means that if a vendor bills the county $100, we pay them $98. So for that, it could be any product or service, as long as its federal funding is not involved. So that allows the funding to be used for my department and other procurement activities in the county. So like 23-24, the amount that was collected to the UAP was $20.5 million.
All right, and thank you very much for that. So hypothetically speaking, if we were to double that percentage, that would give us somewhere, based on previous numbers, that would give us something like $40.9 like 41 or 40.6 million dollars. And if I designate the 20 million to the CBO trust fund, as so long as it's legally available and legally permissible, is that something we can do?
I think it will require change in our ordinance to change that from 2% to 4%. You also have to keep in mind that when vendors are giving us pricing, they do take that into account, although we are very competitive and we compare ourselves to the other jurisdiction. So, yes, it can be done, to answer your question.
Thank you. To the county attorney, as it relates to this particular question and the creation of a community-based organization trust fund, which means that it cannot be touched and it will not be a general fund account. This would be simply a segregated account, and all the monies within this particular trust fund would be geared towards the community-based organizations. Is that pretty much an accurate statement I'm making if we're creating this trust fund?
Commissioner, we would work on the legislation with you to the extent it's legally available and permissible, as you had suggested, the funds to ensure that those funds are spent for the purposes that you've described for CBOs.
Thank you. The next question goes back to David. David, you there? Gotcha. I love you, brother. My question is very simple, and I'm a simple guy on this one. A few years ago, we were charging $17,000, and we've heard that discussion earlier, and we've heard from our approach chair and some of these reports. We were charging about $17,000 to each department to be paid into a fund that would then pay for the claims. Is that an accurate statement?
So we develop a per employee rate. So that rate was, yes, about 17, which was increased to 20, and now is 19,200 per employee, and it's included in each department's budget.
Right, right. So I don't want you to think I'm here to do a gotcha moment, because I'm not. So I just want to put that there. But for clarity purposes, again, I'm just a simple guy, black and white. It is what it is, right? So my question is, walk me through the process in simple terms, how this works. So the departments, finish that for me. The department has a bucket of money.
So I put out a memo to put it, step one, I put out a memo in December to all the department directors, and I basically say, these are the assumptions you should be building in your budget. One of them is healthcare. And we incorporate that or build it into our budgeting system, that per employee rate. That ultimately shows in the department's budget the expenditures in salary, the salary or personnel services category. They need to submit a budget that includes all their expenditures, including the one we're talking about right now for group health.
Right, and so this is good. This is a good start, because now we're understanding this. So you draft the memo, correct, to the departments?
Step one, I send out a memo. That's the first part of the process.
And that memo contains assumptions that were created by your department, OMB. Is that an accurate statement?
Correct. During the process, that number typically changes
Right.
based on a process that we go through with PIOD staff,
Right.
the clerk, the actuaries, etc.
All right, so let me, because I don't want to draw this out, I know a few of my colleagues have questions also. If I'm looking at the numbers you've provided based on the memo that you've given to the department, there's almost a $90 million increase in expenditures that the departments collectively have to account for in order to go into this fund. Is that an, give or take, accurate statement as it relates to the numbers? Give or take between $85 and $90 million. Your memo requested that those departments remove those funds from the pots that they have primarily enterprise funds / general funds to be paid into a trust fund that will then go to pay for hypothetical or potential claims in the near future. Is that about right?
The number's more than 90 million, but the rest of your sentence is basically correct.
So the 90 million is above what we did in the 2024 and 2025 budget.
I could validate that, verify that number, but it sounds about right, sir.
And the 90 million that you are requesting by way of a memo came based on your analysis, or was this an actuarial analysis that gave you the premise and/or the wherewithal to say to these departments, there's going to be a $3,000 increase per employee within Miami-Dade County to be paid into a trust fund?
Initially, it's OMB's analysis, but that analysis includes other parties through the next 6 months, which ultimately we come to a final number in June.
Which leads me to this question here. You did something and you said something earlier that was very profound, is that there were, the numbers were actually at $20,000. You unilaterally reduced that to 19.2. Is that an accurate or fair statement to make?
After going through the steps of the process, it was reduced from 20 and change down to 19,200 per employee, yes.
Who did you consult to make that decision to make that decrease from 20 to 19.2? Was that an actuarial or?
It included them to include OMB staff, HR staff, the clerk staff, and anyone else.
Commissioner Gilbert is giving me issues over here because I mispronounced something, but I'm going to be okay. So,
It includes several different staff from several different entities.
All right. That means you have data.
Yes.
And earlier when we talked about having the ability to have another reduction, your statement was you would need time to go back, do the analysis, get more data. I'm just asking, right? If you have the data to make the decrease from 20,000 per employee, which is a $3,000 increase, and you have the analysis and the data to do it and bring it down to a 19.2, why can't you use the same analysis and the same data to get us back to 24, 25 if you already have the data and the analysis already based on the memorandum that you've produced?
I guess the way I can say it is the same analysis tells us that it should not be lowered and it should be no less than 19.2.
So your position today is if we were to lower that 19.2 to, let's just say, 18, that the trust fund would be insufficiently funded?
Yes.
So we know now, based on your representation, that at 18, that's not it. The fund would be not properly funded, and we would be in harm's way based on.
The reason we initially increased it is because of the contribution that needs to go to reserves based on the increase in claims that we've seen in the past year.
If we were to direct you at this particular moment, because we're talking about $90 million increase, like literally $90 million. And I'm trying to get somewhere where we can split this and everyone walks away. Get me to the number, and don't tell me it's 19.2, right? If this board were to direct you and say to you, OMB, we want this number to be no less than 17, but no more than 18. Are you telling us at this moment that it's going to come back not fully able to be carried out? Is that what I'm hearing?
Based on the advice of our actuary, the data that shows us that we need to contribute more to the fund, primarily because of the number of claims and the cost of those claims, that would be fiscally irresponsible.
I get that. Have you turned those documents over to the commissioners so that we can see what they were saying in their reports, the actuarial?
I have not. If you're asking for those documents, sir, they can be provided.
Can I have those today?
I will ask PIOD to provide you the documents.
I'm
With the-
indicating yes, that they can be provided today.
To the board today?
Yeah, that's
Okay. And two more questions, Dave, and then and I promise you I'm out of here on this one. Let's talk about the firefighters. You've been seeing the news, you've been reading the reports, and I just want clarity. If we were to place them in a position where they are responsible for carrying out a county-wide benefit, and you were to tax that to the fire district, is it an accurate statement to say that we're depleting their fire district funding 2 to 3 years down the road, which will put them in a worse situation than they're in now, which would then trickle down to the people, especially those in the South who we normally depend on the fire department to bring forth like these services. We don't have that many municipalities. So when we're talking about fire rescue and we're talking about the helicopters, is there a way we can deal with this without putting the residents of Miami-Dade County in harm's way? Is there a number that we can pull back to help them? Can we negotiate? Can we meet somewhere in the middle? I want both sides to hurt, right? And they say that's the art of negotiations, where both sides walk away feeling as if they've lost something. On the record, can we do something?
Through the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
We've been very clear on this matter. We value so highly the bravery, the dedication of our men and women in the fire department, and we've been able to continue to grow the service for the last few years. We've been recognized by national accreditation as being one of the best departments in the country, and we stand by the fact that what we're doing is appropriate because it is a fire service matter, and that we have not in any way compromised our ability to provide service or not provided anything that was in our plan. In fact, we've grown the fire department. We've added 21 new units. We've hired. We've added equipment, modernized, and it is appropriate and fair to do what we've proposed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two more questions, and I would have had one more, but this is a great segue. To question to David, I guess, because you're at the podium, not because any other reason. And how many vacancies that are currently fully funded in this current fiscal year?
Where, in fire?
No, overall, in total, entire county.
Mr. Vice Chair, I don't have that number off the top of.
Is it safe to say the floor could be somewhere like 3,000?
Including the proprietaries, it's possible, yes.
So is it safe to say that the average amount that's being budgeted, let me just not assume, let's just say there are 3,000 vacancies. Are those 3,000 vacancies fully funded in this current year's budget?
In the general fund, absolutely not.
So the 3,000 vacancies, there are no funding associated with the general revenue portion of those vacancies.
This year in particular, we slowed down on, I wouldn't say that we froze positions, but we did not fill even what was initially funded due to the 402 gap and basically the challenges that we saw during the year.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, I know you're waiting, but Senator Garcia has been waiting patiently, so you're recognized, and then, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Commissioner McGee, I appreciate that last line of questioning, because that was the first thing that I was going to open up with. I've been working on budgets for quite some time, public budgets for many years, particularly when we did the healthcare budget in the legislature. We put together a $36 billion budget just on the healthcare aspect, on the healthcare side. David, I do have a question and some concern on how we budget then, because when we talk about positions and there's an FTE, there's always a dollar amount tied to that FTE. How do we have open positions that are not funded? Because based on the numbers from the Auditor General that we have, and based on the numbers that we've been able to extrapolate from the budget, I see that we have between 3,000 and 4,000 open positions. What is the value of those 3,000 to 4,000 open positions? Because right now we're saying that we don't have a number tied to them. There's no funding associated with them. So then how are we able to budget in the budget for that? I don't understand. I really don't understand that. If you could help me understand that, I would truly appreciate that.
There are funding tied to a portion of the 3,000 vacancies, if that's the number. What I was specifically referring to, the question was related to those positions funded by general fund. The proprietaries have vacancies that are funded that they're trying to recruit for. And they've been trying throughout the year. But what we do in the budget is, if we can't fill a position, if you have 10 positions, but you can only fill 5 during the year, we apply an attrition to that. In other words, we only fund 50% of those positions.
Understand that?
But specifically in the general fund, we have not funded, especially next year. The first thing we did is we looked at what was vacant, so we wouldn't have to cut a filled position. We unfunded those that were vacant.
And I appreciate that, because based on the numbers that were provided to us by the Auditor General, and again, the ones that, and first of all, Ida Mendez Cartaya, thank you for the work that you've been helping us with, helping our office with in the budget, because you have been instrumental trying to get us to understand a lot of these numbers. You know, I'm seeing it's between $3,000 or $4,000, 3 or 4,000 positions. So I think it's important for us, the County Commission, to have a detail on exactly what is a dollar amount associated with those positions, whether they're half the year, whatever it is. There has to be a dollar amount tied to those open positions that I think it's important for us to understand what that is. Because if I'm basing it on the numbers that we had last year on the average salaries for the county. In 2025, I guess the average salary is somewhere $95,000. Prior to that was $72,000. This year, we haven't been able to see what the average salary is for our budget. So simple math, if there was 50,000, I guess, thinking, well, we had different numbers in the office, we could easily find $200 million there. But you're saying that those is not completely funded. So I think it's important for us in this county commission to understand exactly how much unfundedness or funded open position exists.
And how they are funded.
And how they are funded, where the money's coming. And I get it, you have the proprietaries that are very different and separate from the county, but it's important for us. And when we talk about these issues, I think this is what happens with us in the county commission, that while we do have a detailed budget, and I say that because under our ordinances it says that they're supposed to provide a detailed budget to us. It's not a line item budget. Detail is in the eye, I guess, of the definition of our attorneys or the administration, and this is why it's extremely important, especially when we have these budget shortfalls. Not even when we have budget shortfalls, it's important for us as legislators to make sure that we know exactly where every single dollar is going to. I also think that I have a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman, across different sectors of our budget. When we look at water, I just received a call today from one of our municipalities. Can you help me understand how the water increases are happening? My understanding is that UMSA water rates are less than the wholesalers. do we have a rhyme or reason on how these increases are happening?
And really quick, while they prepare that response, there's a lot of white noise in the back. It's mostly white noise, right? Is that? It ain't black. So is that politically incorrect these days now? Is that politically incorrect now? Am I canceled now? No, guys, I never signed up, so I can't get canceled. Guys, can you show some respect to the senator and the administration responding, please? Chief, go ahead.
Chairman Rodriguez, for the record, Roy Coley, Chief Utilities and Regulatory Services Officer. If I understand the question, Senator Garcia, is your question
I'll repeat it. Okay. My understanding, I could be wrong. My understanding, I received a call from one of our mayors in the district. I represent 3 different municipalities, or 2 different municipalities, and one to the west of us that just got 5 representatives, and Commissioner Bermudez's district. Is there a difference in the increase of water rates for those that are in UMSA and those proprietary, I guess, the retailers? What is the wholesalers versus retailers? Is there a difference in rate increases?
Yeah, the rates are calculated different, sir, and I wouldn't call it UMSA because many of our customers are not UMSA. It's either the Miami-Dade County Water and Sewer Department's retail customer versus a wholesale customer. All of our wholesale customers are under an agreement that establishes their rate based on cost. Our agreements require us to hire a third party, in this case it's our bond engineer, Acadis, to review the cost of providing services to that wholesale customer. That exact cost is what's charged to each customer. It's estimated every year. The rate is assigned. At the end of the year, there's a true-up. If we have overcharged them, they get a credit. If we have undercharged them, they owe the difference in future bills. Now, our retail customers are not used that same cost formula. Our retail customers is based on total projected cost that the wholesale customers do not pay. And then we have a rate structure that is based on classification of customer, whether it's a commercial, residential, things of that nature. So it's not just a sole cost of producing a gallon of water like it is to wholesale. There's a more complex rate structure, so therefore those rates are different every year.
And I appreciate that. I think we need to come up with a bit more fair structure as it relates to the rate that we charge the wholesalers. I think if we look at what's happening across some of our municipalities, you're seeing a big rate discrepancy, and I think Commissioner, I know the work that Commissioner Gilbert is doing and it was doing in Tallahassee to make sure that we bring some parity to some of our local water municipalities. So I appreciate the work that you were doing, and thank you for that. So I appreciate that. I just want to see if we can try to bring some parity into that, but that's, I think that's what.
Could I add one comment to that answer, sir?
Yes, sir.
We charge a rate to our wholesale customers, and our wholesale customers each individually set the rate for their customers, and invariably each one is different. Some of our wholesale customers mark up the water that we sell them by a great amount, and some of our wholesale customers don't mark it up hardly at all. And so when you look across the county, you see a very large difference in what people pay for water. But one thing is universal across the county. Miami-Dade County charges less than all of our wholesale customers do.
And I appreciate that, because the city of Hialeah right now is going to absorb through their budget stabilization fund and through the reserves, they're going to try to absorb the increase in cost. So that's just on that. But thank you. I appreciate the work that you're doing there. I do have a question, and this came up during the presentation earlier, and it's part of the questions that I have. That $26 million that was given back to us from the tax collector, how is that proportionally distributed? Because of my understanding, I think Commissioner Regalado mentioned it, that it is it's proportionate. That it wasn't just $26 million to general fund. How was that proportionally distributed? Because you have the different funds that pay into it and so forth. How was that done? I mean, how do we distribute that $26 million?
David Clodfelter. So the 26 includes right off the top $6 million that the tax collector has told us in writing that they will not be utilizing or using this year, and they'll be returning.
I understand the money that we got, but how is that proportionally distributed? Because there is rules and laws that tell us when we receive this money back, it has to be proportionally. How is that done?
For this year, that the statute that governs the commissions do not apply to the $6 million because they become a fee officer October 1st. But for the $20 million that the tax collector has agreed to advancing us, about 16 and change of the 20 is countywide, from the countywide taxing district must be returned to the countywide taxing district. About 2 million is the fire district. Library is another few hundred thousand. Okay. 636 to the debt service reserve. Fire rescue is 2,058,000. Library is 382.
Thank you. And when we talk about fire rescue, so first of all, I want to let the community know that we're very proud of our fire department, our fire rescue department. Thank you for the work you do in making sure that we keep our wait times down. When we look at the budget and we see the transfer of air rescue, we're seeing that the transfer of air rescue is going to go from UMSA to the fire department now, right? Correct? What does that do to those municipalities now that currently use the services? Are they going to get away with not paying into for fire rescue? Because my understanding is once he transfers over, it's under the fire rescue, so that means that UMSA is going to absorb the complete cost.
The plan would be for those calls that are outside of the district, the fire department has to approach those municipalities and negotiate whatever that would be, the cost for that service.
Through the chair, could we recognize Ray Jadal, our fire chief?
Please.
Please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Madam Mayor, to all of our appointed leaders, and most importantly to the residents and team members from Miami-Dade County. Ray Jadala, Fire Chief of Miami-Dade Fire Rescue.
Can you address the question?
So in regards to the possibility of charging for air rescue for the municipalities, I know that it has come up. We have a mutual aid policy currently where aid is given to the 5 municipalities, and if at times it's reciprocated where those municipalities give aid to Miami-Dade Fire Rescue. I know that it has come up in regards to a possibility of charging, but we are looking at the way that we operate. We currently operate under a structure that doesn't allow us to charge. But again, we are looking at a few things in regards to making some changes.
I just want the members of this county commission to represent UMSA. You understand that by the switching over of this, you will be absorbing most of the cost for the municipality's use of air rescue. And I think it goes back to what Commissioner Gilbert says, that we should have some consistency across the board in how we do some of our budgeting. So I appreciate that. And when we look at other parts of our budget, Madam Mayor, I appreciate the fact that you did have a conversation yesterday with the Cultural Affairs and Parks community. As chairman of Parks and Cultural Affairs, I think it's extremely important that we invest in these areas, not only because of the residual effects it has on our economy, but what it does to our youth and our communities by making sure that they stay out of trouble and having places to go. And if we are going to continue to be a vibrant, multicultural, cosmopolitan community, we do have to continue to invest in that area. But I do think that what we have before us is just one budget cycle that does not address the concerns the shortfalls that we're going to continue to see moving forward, and we do have to come up with different alternative solutions. And I think to your point, when it comes to the CBOs, when it goes CBOs and cultural affairs and so forth, I think it's important that we do come up with alternative funding sources or solutions. I'm working on something that's very similar to what you said as you proposed it, but I'm working on something that maybe we can work together on. It could be a co-sponsor, because I think we do have to have dedicated funding sources, because we're going to be back at this every single time. And when it comes to the CBOs, Commissioner, Chairman, I think I've had conversations with a lot of the CBOs time and time again. You know where my heart has always been. From my time in the legislature, I believe in the good work that is done in our community. However, we do have to make sure that there's an evaluation of these organizations, what they do, who they service, and what are we getting back. And listen, I get sometimes it's very difficult to quantify it, because a lot of times we quantify it in the back end. It's hard to quantify it on the front end. So we do have to maybe come up with some formulas to make sure that we protect, we help those organizations that are really, at the end of the day, saving the county money. When they say saving, because a lot of these non-for-profits and a lot of these community-based organizations save us on the criminal justice side, save us on the police side, save us on incarceration. And this, sometimes it's very difficult to match those, and as policymakers, we all a lot of times have a difficult time understanding those economic benefits that happen in our community, aside from the social benefits. So we'll continue to work on those issues together. So let me see, I think another point that we have here is on the issue of transportation. I do agree, I see what we're doing with buses and STS, and yet our Metro Mover is completely free. And I understand that was done under the penny sales tax that was passed. I think it's time that we start considering looking at the actual fees that we can charge for the financial district. Most of the people that are using the People Mover right now, at a time when the People Mover was created, there wasn't a lot of action in downtown and in the Brickell area, but now a lot of the folks that are using the People Mover are people of means. We see these towers that have gone up, financial districts that are here, Tech Hub is here. We see how much money is being invested, and they're the ones that are using it, and yet they're using it for free. And people that are on STS and people that are elderly are being charged, and the bus users are being charged a little bit more money. So I hope we could consider finding a viable solution that can help with that. And also, when we look at the, I heard Mr. CF, Jimmy, what's your title?
Chief Operating Officer.
Chief Operating Officer. The Chief Operating Officer, when he mentioned about eliminating the fee for the parking of parks. I mean, the parking at the parks, in the regional parks. I appreciate that. But you said that we were going to eliminate just those that were increased this year. Amelia Earhart Park has been being charged for parking for many, many years. It's a regional park. And I understand, and I'm willing to go with what the administration wants to do, eliminating a tropical park. But I think it's important then, if we are going to do that, then the monies at Amelia Earhart Park that are being charged to the residents of Northwest Dade stay at Amelia Earhart Park. They shouldn't be using to fund other areas, other parks. So I would ask the administration to really look at that, if not eliminating them completely, but if we can, we should. But if not, the money should stay in our parks.
Senator, could I just, you could yield to me for a second on that?
You're recognized, Commissioner.
Thank you. I can't agree with you more, because that's our regional park.
Exactly.
So Opelika, Miami Gardens, Hialeah, Hialeah Gardens, that's our regional park. And so our residents, when they go to their regional park, are going to pay for parking.
Grandin,
and so
too.
that is definitely
Grandin.
Yeah, so
I agree with
Brandon.
this.
So I believe that there needs to be, and I'm not saying don't charge for parking. I'm saying that there has to be consistency. Yeah, or it stays there. Something has to happen with that.
All right, so look, I want to make sure we can see we can keep those dollars at the actual parks. So, but anyway, and again, it's minimal, but it's money that could go a long way to help. So, with that, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the time, but I really do think it's important that we look at the number of the unfunded positions, come up with a number for that. Not the unfunded position, well, yeah, the unfunded and the funded positions, because there has been about an 11% increase from 2001 to 2026, I believe it was. It's been about 12% increase for new positions. So it's important for us, if we're going to do budgeting, to have those numbers, and hopefully when we move forward, make sure we have detailed budgets, line by line budgets, so we can know exactly where the monies are, and as we move forward. So I look forward to continuing to work with the administration. I think it's important on the issue of fire rescue. The air rescue, we need to address that. Make sure that we do address the issue of travel. I've seen, thank you, Yinka, for your report on your auditor's report. We see how much money has been spent on travel. While I recognize that travel is important for some of our departments, I think we can start looking at some of those expenses, just the same way that we look at other parts of our budget. So, and with public safety, Madam Mayor and Madam Sheriff, thank you for your open and candidness when we have our conversations. It's important to ensure that public safety remains at the forefront of all of our conversations, both you and fire, and I look forward to continuing to work to ensure that we do have our investments and make our investments, because we have been able to keep our community safe based on what we have. I think that the percentage of increase versus, and I'm glad you clarified that, because I did ask her a question, well, what's the difference? Why is there so much an increase on this side versus the increase of our budget? But there is a lot of commitments that were made prior to her becoming sheriff that need to be honored. So I think we can find a happy medium so we can all try to work together and ensure that private safety stays at the paramount. But Mr. Chairman, on the parks, let's work on the parks as well. I appreciate that, and thank you all for this time, and look forward to making sure that we have a budget that represents everyone. And before I finish, Mr. Chairman, when we look at at budget priorities, yes, we have to be consistent with our budgeting, but we also have to, when we look at fee increases and increases across the board, our residents can't pay anymore. We shouldn't be asking for more. We should be doing our budget the same way that we do our budgets at home. Look at everything that we have and make sure that we eliminate the waste. It could not have been waste before, but now it's costing us more and more money, to make sure that we don't eliminate services that are paramount to our community. I think we also have to define what is the essential services. I think we've had a conversation about that we don't really define what are exactly the essential services, because we talk in all these different, we say these words, catchphrases, but we don't all speak with the same definition of these words. So I think at some point before we get to the budget, our next budget hearing, we should try to define some of these terms so we can know exactly what we're talking about. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate everyone's work on this.
Through the chair, just a point of clarification for
Yes,
a
Madam
point
Mayor.
from the senator. Thank you. And I do certainly applaud the efforts to create dedicated funding, multi-year recurring funding for these community services and supports. Believe me, music to my ears. Thank you so much. I do want to clarify, we're not doing unessential travel. We've already eliminated non-essential travel. I'm not approving it. And David just needs to clarify something about the fire
David,
fees.
go ahead.
Just to clarify, the UMSA taxing district has never paid for air rescue. It was county-wide taxing district. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, and thank you, Senator. And yes, I think that's important. Everything you mentioned. What I would like out of this meeting, and we're still in it, right, is again to sort of like roll up our sleeves, and obviously we share the same sentiment, you and I, and most of us here on this board, as to how we should run the budget. But I think we need to roll up our sleeves and find it, right? Like we're so if we're all in agreement that we need to this is an example. I don't.
It's the open positions. I get you, Mr. Chairman.
But if it's our position of this board that we want to fully fund CBOs, like just as an example, then I think now is the time to kind of say, okay, fully funding CBOs is equal to $49 million. We have 12 million right now identified, or 18 million identified. That delta, we need to find it. It's not just say we want to do it, because yeah, we want to do it. And for the record, I'm being told there's well over 40 CEOs and executive directors from different CBOs here today, a lot of which are stuck downstairs and we're not able to come up due to space. But, and again, I'm not speaking for any of you all as my colleagues, but if that's our wish and we're all saying, and we're giving and I'm not calling anyone out, obviously, but like if we're going to do a soundbite and we're going to get passionate and we're going to do all that, is where are we going to get the money from, right? And that's what I would like to see come out of today. It's let's roll up the sleeves. I mean, I separated all day to be here. Unfortunately, I know some have things to do, but I'm ready to solve this problem. I've been doing a deep dive into this for the last several months. I agree, Madam Mayor and Senator Garcia, with our Vice Chair. I agree with that trust fund that the Vice Chair brought up, and some with parameters, of course, and obviously that has to be, the kinks would have to be worked out, but I think it should be streamlined, right? And attach accountability, transparency, and an ROI. I know that you probably have really good input. I know, but the one person that never speaks is actually been waiting patiently. So Commissioner Steinberg, you're recognized, and then I'm going to work this way.
Thank you. A lot of great points were being made. It's funny. I spent a lot of time going through the 3 budget books. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, because you have countywide, then you have by department, and you have to try to figure out how to navigate all that. I don't know if that's done by design, David, but we had to go finding and seeking. Okay. We touched on a few different things, and there's some things that obviously we've been meeting with the mayor about specific to the district, but I see here that DTPW has $38 million funded for resurfacing, sidewalks, drainage, and I saw in the memo that you added another $4 million. Is that to that pot?
Potentially, yes. It's to DTPW, Department of Transportation and Public Works, for them to add to their activities for sidewalk repair, patching, filling potholes, etc.
So as we're having these tough conversations, last year, to put it in perspective, we funded $70 million in that category. Now we're at 38 plus 4, so that's not great in terms of just, we're basically cutting it in half. And I'm concerned that we may not be able to, as a main priority, have the ability to keep our streets appropriately paved and do all that. So I don't know what else we can do there, and I don't know if there are any suggestions. It's something I'm putting out. I think it's a good opportunity and an exercise for us today to kind of put out there kind of our thoughts on all of the different items that are being proposed, so that we can have time to digest it and then have those conversations prior to the first reading. So it's something to think about. And I know that you're also merging some departments. So they're going to become divisions within departments, I'm assuming. Does the budget reflect those potential savings from not making them standalone departments?
Yes.
Okay, so it's already in there.
Yes, there's one actual merger that was a division in, switching departments in the mid-year. That was obviously incorporated, and then these other mergers that are mentioned in the budget include whatever savings apply to that merger.
Okay.
Particularly back office and/or any other adjustments.
Okay. Back when the Better Bus Network was put forward, there were a lot of lines that were eliminated. And in my district, in the Northeast area specifically, we had, and I have to find here, we had routes 2, 155, and 19 that were completely eliminated. And from different reasons, and one of the reasons that we were told was because the pedestrian bridge was going to be there to help connect, and there were going to be all these other things that we were going to be able to provide. And unfortunately, now that I'm hearing that we're removing the only option, because then that area was given Uber tickets to have the ability to at least still have a basic ability to have some sort of transit. Then we moved over to Metro Connect, and now it looks like that's being taken away. And so I don't know how we're going to be able to tell these residents that now you're going to have zero alternatives. We took away your buses, then we took away your Uber ability with the, voucher. Now we're taking away the Metro Connect. And I'm not talking about a free service. I mean, they paid for the bus before. What can we do to reconcile that? Because I cannot look at residents and tell them, we took away all your transit options and now you're left with zero.
Through the chair, thank you, Commissioner, for those questions. And Stacy Miller, our director, DTPW, can tell you about the options that we're exploring and really where we are at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Stacy Miller, Director of Department of Transportation and Public Works. Commissioner, thank you for that question regarding Metro Connect. We have been analyzing some alternatives that we're actually working through a number of different scenarios, anywhere from obviously what's included in the current budget today, which is no Metro Connect, to reducing the number of zones, reducing the number of service hours, including a fee structure associated, asking the municipalities to assist us with some of the costs. We're working a number of different scenarios that we will be able to provide.
And I appreciate that. The area I'm speaking to happens to be unincorporated.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I just think that's something that we need to look at between now and our first budget hearing, so that we can try to reconcile what those options would be for our unincorporated residents. Okay.
If I could just add briefly, Commissioner, Cutler Bay is one of the municipalities that actually uses some of their funding to subsidize Metro Connect. So that's one of the things that our director is going to be pursuing with other cities. And again, we absolutely understand UMSA does not have that same pot of money to use for circulators. So obviously we recognize that as well as part of this. We don't want to penalize them.
Thank you. And again, I appreciate that. I have notes everywhere. Everybody was speaking, so I took notes. And some of my points were already stated, but I do think it's interesting when we're talking about the CBOs that a dedicated funding source of some sort, so that that's something I think we should explore to look at that. In terms of fire, it's interesting. I've been sitting here and I have a list of, the different municipalities, and it's interesting when we talk about our fund. Everybody contributes to our general fund. We have our unincorporated, UMSA. We have also the municipalities that contribute a portion to that general fund. And so as I was thinking about it, there are five fire cities, right, that have their own fire. You have Miami Beach, you have Coral Gables, you have Hialeah, Key Biscayne. I'm missing someone. Miami Beach? Miami, right. And everybody, all the residents from all the municipalities in UMSA use it. So I do think it does behoove us to look at how we're going to do that. This year, it's the debt service on the new helicopters that were purchased. Last year, it was the operating cost. So I think there's opportunity there for us to really explore that and take a look at that. And then finally, the parks. Interesting conversation about paying, because Reynolds Park, if you want to go to that regional park, you've had to pay for the last, I don't know how long. And so if there's something that we can do, because I hope they weren't the only park that was paying for years. I really hope that those dollars could be more equitably spent. And that's, some of my thoughts on today's discussion, and there'll be more. Stay tuned.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner. And I agree with your comments, and I'm certain that our Appropriations Chair, Commissioner Regalado, will address some of these things. I know she's been doing a deep dive, but I agree, and I think part of the frustration is specifically as it pertains to Metro Connect, right? And I appreciate you bringing that up, and it's conversations that we've probably had here prior, is it's zeroed out in the budget. Obviously, it affects UMSA the most. UMSA pays the half penny, right, to transportation, but we got minimal service certainly in Westchester. But the thing is that it's the option of eliminating it is presented with no alternative yet, right? It's almost like we should have done it parallel to each other. Like, hey, we're going to eliminate this, but these are like the different options of reinstating some sort of service. So it is music to my ears. I do appreciate the director coming up and stating that their work and mayor, that they're working on some options, and I look forward to discussing them. I wish we would have had those options today. I mean, that's kind of like what the purpose of, and quite frankly, I wish we would have had those options at the same time that the budget was rolled out, saying we're eliminating it. But at a minimum today, and I'm sure that we'll find a solution, and no half mile, last mile, first mile, second miles, 3 miles, 5 miles, or 10 miles will be all the miles, just like kind of like the babies. Never mind. No babies. But yeah, right. But I just wish that obviously Commissioner Gonzalez, myself, obviously Commissioner Steinberg has identified. The Vice Chair said it earlier. He's got a great portion of UMSA. But Commissioner Gonzalez and myself have 100% UMSA. We're the only 2 districts in the county that have 100% UMSA. And I don't know what services you particularly have in District 11, but in District 10, we don't have very much. So obviously we can't abandon the residents. I know it's not the idea, it's not to abandon the residents on their transportation needs. But I do look forward to alternatives or partially funding Metro Connect for these areas that need it, not just my district. It's not a NIMBYism deal, but for UMSA areas that don't have municipalities that can subsidize it. I do want to. Okay, so you forgot one thing and you were speaking. I'll let you, but 1 second. I just want to make. Okay, but so this is what I'm going to do. I am going to have Commissioner Stein. You could speak after? Okay, I'm going to have Commissioner Steinberg just her one last question. Then I was going to work my way this way to Commissioner Gonzalez, and I was going to ask Commissioner Gonzalez that within his questions, and all, since he is the chair of public safety, I understand the sheriff has to leave. Her team will stay, but so like any questions, I'll let him like kind of kick it off, but any questions regarding the sheriff's office that we get to it while she's here. You're saying yours is regarding sheriff, so maybe from it could continue going that way. No, yeah. Skip to them. Okay, so with that, are we good to go to the next? Mayor, you're good. You could circle back.
Well, I'll come
later.
back later
Okay,
to talk about
perfect.
the
My list is getting
Metro
really
Connect.
So you're right after Gonzalez, followed by Commissioner Orbis. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. This is a co-meeting of Appropriations Chair and I, so you can kind of jump in with Gonzalez has the floor, then Orbis, but you can kind of like work it around and make sure everybody's happy and we get all the questions asked and answered. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, I really want to thank the chair and the chair of the Appropriations Committee for putting this together. I think it's extremely helpful. At least to me, it has caused me to go down some rabbit holes. Thank you. But I think it's going to be very helpful. I think it's going to be very helpful. Now, my thing from the beginning, and I think most of my colleagues up here, I don't particularly think that we should blatantly pick a number and cut things. I don't particularly think that we should just cut certain CBOs, not cut certain CBOs, right? I think that in order to really put this together, and that's why I appreciate you putting this meeting together, is we need to identify the difference between necessities and things that are nice to have. And so there are some things, in my humble opinion, that are non-negotiables. Like public safety, to me, is a non-negotiable. But with that being said, it is a non-negotiable, but we need validity to what we're claiming is non-negotiable. So I do have a couple of questions for the sheriff specifically and for the fire department. But before I get into that, the vice chair mentioned something about unfilled vacancies and unfilled positions. And so, David, if I could just quickly ask you, He said it was somewhere around 3,000. These are positions that we are looking for, but we don't have employees for. Is that correct?
Right, it was described in the question as funded vacancies.
Got it.
So,
Money that's allocated for positions, but we don't have people for those positions.
right, and there are a certain amount of positions that are funded to be filled through the year. There's also positions that, knowing that you can't fund them based on the time it takes to recruit and other issues that exist, but we load what's referred to as attrition, and we do not fund those positions. So if you have 10, if you fund 5, then you're going to fill 5. And those things that, if you really need to fund the 10, then in the mid-year budget amendment, we'll describe Department X needs this, and so on.
Funded. If we don't fund those positions, what happens with the money that's allocated for those positions?
If we don't fund them, either it's because we don't have the funding.
Well, if we don't find somebody for those positions and there's money allocated for those positions, what happens with that money?
Well, in the general fund, the answer is there's no money to fund them. That's basically describes, it goes towards the budget gap that we.
So as you sit here today, you're telling me that with this proposed budget, there is no money, absolutely no money for any unfunded positions that's coming from the general fund?
As proposed, no. If something changes during the year, then it may, revenue may be realized to fund a position that we didn't. It's a plan, and it's a plan that we know at that given point in time. But in the general fund, what we did is we defunded those vacancies, and we also eliminated several positions in next year's budget.
All of those vacancies?
Off the top of my head, I would say yes. I don't have all the details in front of me, Commissioner, but we did unfund everything that we could before we started adjusting positions that were filled.
Okay, so if I could get the commission auditor, because I'm looking at a report from the commissioner auditor, and I want clarification, because from the commissioner auditor's office, I'm getting about 4,000 to 5,000 positions for this budget that are funded for, and of those 4,000 to 5,000 departmental positions, I'm getting 1,400 that are coming directly from the general fund. So if I could have Yinka come up, can you give some clarification? Because Mr. Clodfelter is saying the exact opposite, sir. So,
Excuse me, Commissioner, I just want to let you know, Virginia Washington is our recently appointed Deputy Director over Human Resources in our PIOD department, and she's here as well to answer any questions.
thank you. And please feel free, if you have the answer to any of these things, please feel free to jump in. But specifically to you, Commissioner Auditor, can you explain what the discrepancy here is? Because Mr. Clodfelter is saying that there is no funding of these unfilled positions projected for this budget from the general fund. So why am I looking at a report from you saying otherwise?
Commissioner Auditor, our report reflects vacancies across the county. The budget, that's the highest. Our report reflects vacancies across the county. We broke down the vacancies by department because each department is funded differently. We identified that about 40% of those vacancies are tied to general fund departments, about 1,400. Within general fund departments, not all general fund departments, and I hate to use the word general fund departments, but funded through the general fund, are 100% general fund. So we went into each department to determine what portions of their budget was general fund, to determine which positions were general funded in that department. And then we accounted for what the Director of Budget referred to as the attrition rate, which is what's built into the budget to reduce the personnel cost, in addition to the frozen positions. And we have a percentage, at this point, we estimate about up to between 20 to 35% of the vacancies were still funded. We don't have any support for 100% unfunded general fund positions in our report.
Right, but see, at that percentage you're saying, in my head, I'm thinking it's about 1,400 positions where the money would be allocated from the general fund and would be cooked into this budget. That's what I'm getting when I'm reading your overview. But Mr. Clodfelter is saying that there is zero money going from the general fund or allocated to the general fund for those 1,400 positions. I would assume those 1,400 positions are going to amount to a lot of money. So it's either there or it's not.
Okay, Commissioner, yes, you're correct. 40%, which is about 1,400 positions, are tied to general fund departments. Of that percentage, there are funded general fund positions that are vacant.
They are funded, Mr. Clodfelter or Madam, can somebody clarify? He's saying that they are funded from the general fund. You are saying that there's no money in the general fund that has been allocated for these positions. So I don't know if I'm stupid or is somebody lying. Like I don't get it.
Well, first of all, I would never lie to you.
I know you wouldn't, sir.
So
it has to be that I'm stupid.
what? I'll stop there. So, Commissioner, with all due respect, there are some positions, as Yinka explained, that are in those departments that are general funded.
Okay.
They may be funded with a federal grant, unless there's, and I will be sitting with Yinka, and I will talk to him, and I'd like to see what he's referring to, what positions. Like COSD, Community Services. That department is a general fund department. It's also funded with several federal grants. So unless that analysis has been done, that you tie the funding to each specific vacancy, and it may be a vacancy that 20% is general fund, 80% is federal grant. So I'd like to see how he derived the number of 1,400. Second thing.
Okay, but let me stop you there, because if there is a 20%, 40%, some money is coming from the general fund. Right. So
Yes.
are you a liar?
Then maybe at this point,
Or did you misspeak?
Okay, so I'll leave it at that. I won't.
Just a point of order.
I'm just
Point of order to
asking.
the chair. A point of order to the chair. Who's chairing?
Yes.
If we could, point of order.
Yeah, let's just stick to the
Dial it
facts,
back.
folks. Yeah, let's just stick to the facts. So
Can we sit down? Can we sit down with the commission auditor after this meeting and go through these numbers? Because I really want to get to the bottom of this. I understand what you're saying, and I believe you, but at the same time, I have a report from the commission auditor saying the exact opposite. And so maybe this needs clarification, but if you understand that if there is a 20%, 10%, 5% that's coming from the general fund, if that does exist, then there is some funding coming from the general fund for unfunded positions.
Commissioner, the only thing that I would add to that is that this is a snapshot in time where we're not looking at a budget that has that much federal or state money. So currently, when you take a snapshot of a department like CASD, who historically had a lot more funding at the federal level, then in this moment in time, that is going to draw mainly from the general fund, which is one of the reasons why this is one of the departments that was reduced and the vacancies eliminated, because a lot of these positions were tied to grants. So I think
That makes sense. That makes sense.
yeah, both things can be true, right? We can hold two conflicting points, and that is that there were positions that were funded by grants, and once those grants were sunsetted, those positions were held vacant, and now we're eliminating them because that grant funding is not there, and this changes every 3 to 6 months. So I think both things can be true.
So I think to your point, the best thing would be for us all to sit down together and have this conversation rather than have two conflicting reports, and then get to the bottom of how much is coming from the general fund and figure out, if that monies can be used in different ways. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Really appreciate it. So, when we're talking about public safety, I was paying attention to the sheriff's presentation.
Do you want the
and
sheriff to come up?
If I could please have the sheriff come up.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Now, Sheriff, my first question is relevant to. So, I mean, I'm looking at your presentation, and in your presentation, you cite to 63 million that needs to be funded because that 63 million, from what you're saying, is part of the collective bargaining agreements.
That is correct.
Did you negotiate those bargaining agreements?
I did not.
But those agreements, nonetheless, are agreements that we have to abide by.
Yes, sir.
Now, you're saying that the current funding that you have does not cover the monies to pay for this agreement.
Correct.
Can I please have somebody from the administration clarify? Because I just want to make sure. That that's correct. Because I was under the impression that the sheriff had enough money to, at the very minimum, cover for the payroll of what was bargained for.
Through the chair, in addition to David Clodfelter, Ryan Lafarga and our Office of Management and Budget has been the main person interfacing with our constitutionals. So I'm going to ask that Ryan approach with David.
Point of clarity, please. What the question was?
So the question here is, the sheriff has stated that in the budget that is allocated to her constitutional office, that she's, rightfully said that needs to be funded completely as per law. She's saying that she is not receiving the 63 million that is necessary for a collective bargaining agreement that is, bare minimum what she needs to get. That's what the sheriff is saying. Can you clarify that? Because I was under the impression that that monies was allocated, because we certainly wouldn't unfund the sheriff's office.
So, based on our analysis and discussions with the sheriff's office, they are funded for the CBA expenses, but to pay the CBA expenses and other line items such as overtime, which the sheriff did bring out that she needs more overtime, she doesn't have enough to do what she's asking for in those other line items. I hope I answered the question.
So you're saying she does have enough money, but there are other things that she is saying that is necessary that would then impede her, that if she's going to fund that, she can't fund the 63 million. But you've allocated the 63 million is what you're saying.
She has enough expenditure authority to pay for the collective bargaining agreement expenditures. It's the other line items that she's asking for that she doesn't have in totality.
If I may just to make sure that we're on the same page, because I hear what he's saying. He's saying it's ultimately up to the sheriff to determine how to spend the budget that's
You're the chair?
allocated.
Yes.
That's true.
Go ahead.
So I made one specific slide. The cost is 63 million, just for that. I received a $50 million proposed budget. How does that cover the collective bargaining agreements?
So, I mean, I don't want to get into an argument, but
Right.
is that true? Like,
The proposal was 56? It was about 50, between 50 and 60, so there's the question, again, if it's related, is there enough to pay for the collective bargaining agreement expenditures? The answer is yes, but to the sheriff's point, she is asking for more to cover other line item expenditures that
yes,
she's saying are
Mr.
necessary.
Klofitzer, but she's claiming that she only received a proposed budget for 50 million, and then she's saying that the total cost is 63 million. that would give it about a $13 million shortfall.
Commissioner, where are you now?
Yes.
Where are you now? What number are you? Let's not get into how we
Yeah.
started this very interesting negotiation. But where are you now?
Yeah. Is the money there right now or not?
So, go ahead.
Through the chair, Brian LaFargue, Office of Management and Budget. The current proposal, including the $7.5 million that was part of the mayor's proposed budget, has an increase of about $64 million to the sheriff's office
So what's the total number?
in the general fund. The total number from the general fund would be, with that funding as well as the funding from the school crossing guards, would be $907 million.
And actually, Ryan does want to explain about the crossing guards, because he did look up at the statute to get clarity on that.
Can you clarify that?
Clarify what, sir?
The crossing guards?
Yes, certainly. So the vice chairman had a previous question earlier related to the red speed. Per Florida statute, chapter 316, this board, the board has the opportunity to enforce school detection zones throughout, unincorporated Miami-Dade. So in the resolution that was passed by this board, $33 of the $100 citation is returned to Red Speed for the installation of the speed detection systems as well as the administration. The remaining funding is proportionally based off of Florida statute. What is retained by the county, a portion of that, 5% of that, goes to the sheriff's office for school crossing guard retention and recruitment. But when it comes to the 60% that is returned to the board, what has been determined is that that funding source would be split similar to the QNIP funding, which is proportionate of the UMSA population comparison within those commission districts. Now, our estimations based off of the balance of that funding source to date is around $6 million that would be going towards these commission districts. That's up to about 6 or 7 months. With an annualized revenue, it can be determined at a later time what that amount would be for next year.
Can you explain what it could be used for?
Yeah, and what it could be used for is for traffic calming and traffic detection, but also for other public safety initiatives.
So it could be used for police?
Correct.
Okay. Now, so right now, we're at 907 million.
That's correct.
Which is the proposed budget for the sheriff.
That's correct. The general
That's the
fund.
general fund portion. not-
General fund portion.
Only, correct.
And Sheriff, you mentioned something that caught my ear as far as the overtime goes. Because just logically, if we don't have enough bodies, if we don't have enough officers out there, then it would only be logical that we're going to have to pay for overtime, which theoretically could be more expensive. And so you told me, or you didn't tell me, you told the commission, you explained in your presentation that there is a national requirement per 1,000 residents. What's the national requirement per 1,000 residents?
It's 3.5 law enforcement officers. In some cities, it's, deputies, and some it's police officers.
So
3.5 per 1,000 residents.
3.5 per 1,000 residents. And you mentioned that right now we're at 2.5.
That is correct. I wanted to be able to give this board a starting point as to why I'm so adamant about next year's academy classes, because if the fact is that I could use all of the budget to pay for the prior commitments, it would leave me at zero in hiring. That means I will be back in the same position that I was just a few months ago when I came back from my amended budget, which is I need to put deputies in the pipeline in order to maintain attrition and not lose services. So again, not asking for more deputies, just showing you the difficult position that we're currently in and the need to just maintain our current levels of service through these academy classes that I'm asking for funding.
Do you know what the current percentage of folks that retire is?
We lose
How many officers are we losing a
between
month?
130
or a
and
year?
150 a year is what we lose. So
In
some
retirement?
months 9, yes, sir, in retirement, or that they move on to another job.
And as we sit here today, even though we have the most effective police department in the nation, perhaps the country, I mean, perhaps internationally, because we have Colombia coming down here and they're training with our guys. We have several different countries that come here and get training from our guys and girls. Even though we have the greatest police department, if we don't have enough bodies to fill the per thousand, how would that affect our overtime?
It would absolutely force us to have to use more overtime. Less deputies in order to serve our community absolutely has an effect. That means have less deputies on the road to handle calls for service. Calls for service times can be affected. Long-term investigations, I won't have as many bodies to commit to those long-term investigations. Some of the expansions of some of the crimes that we're seeing, I won't have those bodies to be able to expand them and address those crime trends. It is 100% a direct impact on police services to have less bodies. The only way, if I don't have the bodies in numbers that I can cover for that, is to pay the overtime and have those deputies stay longer during their shift.
And my last question, as far as this point is concerned, when we talk about those special events, right? We talk about FIFA, we talk about a Super Bowl, we talk about, Formula One. For those special events, the police officers that are assigned to those specific events, are they receiving overtime?
So many of those events, obviously, if they're hiring the deputies to perform that police function, they're paying for that.
So some of those events are going to pay for it.
However, that's not all of the services that we provide for each of those events. So
Okay.
there are many in-kinds that we provide, as well as in order to prepare to support that event, we have to do a bunch of enforcement, right? And a lot of presence to ensure that the overall event. So it's a combination of both them paying, but there is a price tag attached to it as well.
Okay, thank you. I think those are all my questions for the sheriff. I do have some for fire, but I know that some of my colleagues want to ask the sheriff questions before she leaves.
Yes,
So I will yield as long as I get my time back, though.
I'll give it back.
You will
to
get it back.
I'll give it
No,
back to
no worries.
Thank you, thank you.
Commissioner Orbis, you're recognized.
Yes, and it's probably more of a question for administration, but maybe the sheriff can jump in as well. So in the memo that we received yesterday from the mayor with the updates, it states that the sheriff's office is returning 10.3 million in unspent funds from 24-25, and then out of that, we are giving them back 7.5 million of the 10.3 million. So if she has such a gap that she needs to fill, why don't we just give her the full 10.3? Why don't we just leave that in her budget? Why are we pulling it back to then give her back some of that?
Thank you, Commissioner, and through the chair. So obviously, it's statutorily decided that constitutionals other than the tax collector can't have a carryover, so it does revert to the general fund. We did increase the funding in the mid-year, as was mentioned, and of course, we recognized that the sheriff needed to put together some academies, which she had the funding to do, and so on. So basically, we are in the position of saying that what she needs to fund, she has, because she didn't use all of it. And I will defer to David to answer in more detail about that. But again, our position is not that we're cutting anything. We're simply saying that the dollars are there to be able to fill the vacancies. So if I could ask David to
I
get
appreciate
into
it, but
any more
that's not
detail.
exactly my question.
Oh, but so the reason is that we don't think it's necessary, and we have all these other holes to fill. So we think that what has been allocated is, by our conversations and our estimation, will provide for the level of public safety. So that's why that was not. And this is going, every year there's going to be the same situation where constitutionals don't spend all of their budget. I imagine that this is the first year, obviously not even a full year, that our sheriff has served. And we know that she'll continue budgeting and spending the dollars that are available to her. So, we're here and we have reserves should there be an emergency. And again, I would just like to, it is really David that advised us about that based on the conversations that they've had. So if we could ask David to.
Would you like to expand on that?
So after having conversations, the 7.5, it was decided that that would be the number to give back.
So if the board deems that we'd rather leave the 10.3 in the sheriff's budget, is that something that can be done, that we just waive that requirement of her to return it?
It's
Absolutely,
up to, it's up to the
that's up to
board
you.
to pass the budget, absolutely.
All right.
Through the chair, if I may, a point of clarification. I believe every one of the departments was asked to take a look at what they would be returning to the county at the end of our year. Just as the Madam Mayor mentioned, we have a statutory requirement to return whatever is left in our bankrolls. It's an estimate. It's not an exact number. As I mentioned before, had the hurricane taken a hard left, we'd be looking at a whole different number. So what we offered was $7.5 million that we felt very comfortable in returning. That would be the amount that we would. And obviously, the ask was, okay, well, if everything goes well, what would be a high number that you would be returning? At which point we said, if everything went perfectly well, maybe we can get to 10. But we're comfortable in saying 7.5. So 7.5 is at just what we feel comfortable in saying that today. The 10 is a hope, right? And a prayer that we make it through that day, which would be fine, by the way, if we had already had these conversations earlier on, which, as I had asked, we should always, I believe, as a constitutional office, be afforded the opportunity to make our savings and then roll them over. There would have been a lower number in my ask if I'd been able to say, if I can save $10 million and I know that it will be returned to my budget for next year and I can continue to plan for that, then my ask would have been less, but we didn't have that opportunity. So the appearance of that the 7.5 is being given, it's not. It's being returned because it was, it was a savings that we incurred internally. I'm hopeful that we make it to the 10 million. I really am, because it would only be beneficial to both the county and the sheriff's office. But to say that that is the hard number, for me to stand here and not say that is not the hard number I gave. The hard number I gave was 7.5.
All right. Thank you for the explanation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll yield back to you, Commissioner.
Thank you. If you have a question for the sheriff, and then I have some, Sue. But
Thank you so much, Madam Sheriff.
Hello, Commissioner. Thank you.
A very great and presentation detailing what you need to do your job well. And then your job, and we all agree, is a very important job because it's about public safety. This is important. We all, policymakers here, we prioritize that. And our families, our residents depend on that, on you doing your job well. But since this morning, we've also been discussing this budget crisis, over $400 million shortfall. And I think it was Commissioner Gilbert who said that at this juncture, all of us, all the departments will have at some point do a very thorough evaluation to see how or if they can do the job with less. Because we are facing real strong challenges at this time. So my question to you is that, given that, have you prioritized, have you really done your very thorough evaluation, and can you prioritize of what exactly you need? If you cannot find it, sometimes we know what we need, I know what you need, and I know you know what you need, but, and then we policymakers will do our best, and then I agree with Commissioner McGee, we'll do our best to support you to get the tools that you need to do your job well. But in the event that it was not possible, given the challenges, can you prioritize what you need to be funded right now? That's the first question. And then in terms of the overtime hours, again, given the challenges, given the financial crisis, have you also looked at that to see how you could use the resources that you have to reduce the amount that you need to pay for overtime? So these are the two questions that I have. And we support you. Like I said, I'm going to reiterate the fact that we know your job is important. We want to support you, and we'll do our best. But given the challenges, if we cannot meet you at the level that you want, I'm not saying that we will not. If we cannot, can you prioritize and tell us what you need right now?
Thank you, Commissioner, for that question. So my presentation in regards to our current status and the fact that, you know, no one person in this county should feel comfortable in the fact that we are so below the average of law enforcement representation. That was my starting point, just so everyone knew that we're in a tough spot. But with that said, what I'm coming to you today with, my presentation is recognizing that we're in a very difficult time. I'm asking for the 5 classes so that we're not losing services, so that I don't have vacancies in the future. This is my minimum. My big ask would have been to help me plan right now to start getting that ratio from 2.5 to 3.5, which I think every citizen in this county deserves. But I recognize that we can't do that in 1 year. Overtime, that overtime request is taking into consideration that I'm going to have my academic and life goes up. So 3.5 million is actually not a huge ask in that cover. If I don't get the classes, if I get more vacancies, I will have a much higher overtime. So when I tell you that I'm coming humbly with the very minimum that I need just to keep us where we are, status quo. The conversation about where we need to be, that'll be another day. That'll be another budget cycle. I understand that. I hope that that answers your question.
Thank you.
This is it.
Your bottom line.
This is my bottom line.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Madam Sheriff.
Thank you, thank you, Madam Commissioner. Madam Sheriff, I do have a few questions. I want the board to take note that one of the things that David mentioned was how much of your funding comes from the general fund, because there is part of your funding that does not come from the general fund. And that's something that we all can work on. So have you had the opportunity to do an analysis on the impact fees and what we could do in terms of the impact fees? Because we collect the impact fees for the service that you now provide, and we pass them through to you. But do you have any thoughts in terms of those impact fees and a potential increase in order to meet this demand?
I do happen to know that we have been doing a deep dive into the impact fees. If I may at this time ask Gus Knopfler to stand and join me.
Come on down.
I'll give you, okay.
Yes, we're working with RER on the possibility of adjusting how the impact fees are calculated.
Yes.
But the impact fees can only be used to purchase equipment, new equipment that's tied to growth in the population of the unincorporated area.
I'm aware, and I've talked to Lourdes. I've talked to Lourdes about it, and we all know the limitations of impact fees. However, it would be interesting to know how much of your budget you're shifting in that direction when you look at your capital plan. So so right now in the budget that you're presenting to us, there's none of those uses that are being covered. You're just letting that deferred maintenance go forward.
There's some equipment purchases, and there are some things in our capital plan that are being funded by impact fees. In fact, that's the only thing that's funded out of our capital plan because.
But are there needs beyond that are not in this present budget?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just making the clarification that you're not doing more of that because that's limited by impact fees, right? But we are looking at potentially increasing impact fees to meet that delta.
100%, ma'am. And additionally, I just want to point out there, we're not talking about some of the capital projects that are longer term, that there are needs there as well. So yes, you're correct.
One of the things that you and I have discussed is PSAs, and I know that you would have to stand that up, and I know that that's a whole other thing. But one of the things that I want the board to consider is when we talk about public service aids, there's a lot of uses that we have, like when we fix roads, And when we do infrastructure projects where we're paying top dollar for police officers that quite honestly should be doing something other than standing by our manhole. But in terms of the PSAs, is that something that you're looking at, and at what year, what do you think that could allow us to cut into in terms of the overtime costs?
Thank you. So for those who may not know, Public Service Aid do provide some assistance when it comes to report writing and reference presence throughout our community in kind of non-dangerous roles. So I have a lot of vacancies. I'm only asking to fill a portion of them. We are filling some public service aids currently that we are actively recruiting for. However, the majority of those numbers are in that vacant, non-budgeted type position. Again, if I'm not able to meet that difference, I won't be able to hire public service aides.
Right. It would be interesting before we get to the mid-year to have some analysis on how potentially filling those vacancies could help with the overall budget. Because I think there's something that could be done there, and it might make sense for us. I mean, at this moment, we're just dealing, with what we're dealing with. But I think at the 6-month point, it might make some sense to potentially fill some of those and alleviate some of the overtime that we know ends up going out of control. We talked about impact fees, but I know that you also levy other fees, right? So a lot of those fees we don't talk about much, everything from a false alarm fee to like reporting fees to all that kind of stuff. Is there anything there that can be done? When was the last time those things were looked at?
So again, as we've done our analysis internally and the process for the Office of the Sheriff, we are looking at those things. And you're right, we need to really take a deep dive to look in and when was the last time that these fees were adjusted for cost of living and so forth. But the truth of the matter is that those fees are a very minuscule part of what we collect. It really does just kind of help us a little bit to maintain the offices, the civilian staff that actually process those things.
Right, and that was going to be my last question about civilian staff. So you have talked a little bit about civilian staff and how potentially they could alleviate some of these costs. What are your thoughts on your ability to hire some more civilians to do some of these tasks?
Yes, I'm a big proponent of that. I think that what has happened is over the last decades, we have had this every time we went through a difficult time, the positions that got cut were civilian, and then we're tapping, the functions still have to happen. They don't just disappear. And in fact, in some areas, they increased, right? So we had to turn to the people we had, which were our sworn personnel, right? So I'm looking at it holistically to take those functions that can be handled at the civilian level, which is obviously going to alleviate the number of bodies that I have tied up in these functions and put them back into the role that they were hired to do. So I think it's a very big piece, which is one of the reasons why I, came forth today and say those 54 positions that I'm asking for, it is the bare minimum. This is the bare minimum to help us to stand up. So just like I'm being asked to really look at overtime and cut it, then let me hire civilian to take care of a function that I can then free up one more deputy and put them on the road. So they go hand in hand. They're threaded together.
Thank you, Madam Sheriff. Does anyone have any more questions for the sheriff before she goes?
If I could comment?
Yes.
Thank you through the chair.
Mayor?
Very happy to hear about the possibility of the impact fee situation, which could help not only with maintenance of infrastructure, but also potentially vehicles, I think could qualify. So we're going to certainly, no vehicles? No vehicles. Okay, well, it's our responsibility to maintain the infrastructure of those buildings, so certainly anything would help there, but if there's any capital that is specifically in your request, that certainly would be useful. And we're also going to do a calculus on the future impact of the cameras, because we understand the school system is adding additional sites, so we'll do some analysis and see what additional revenue that could derive.
Thank you, and Madam Mayor, just to clarify, so the impact fees are, if we had additional brand-new deputies, then we could purchase a new vehicle to match it, but we can't for our current fleet. So that's just the caveat.
Right. It's for new, not for maintenance. All right, folks. Thank you, Madam Sheriff. I wanted to, I know we have to go back to Commissioner Gonzalez. I just wanted to answer a few things really quick before we get into more stuff. Commissioner Steinberg, you know, one of the things that I think we should, oh, she's not here. Where'd she go? Oh, there she, there you are, there you are. I'm like, where is she? All right. One thing that I think we need to get back to transit, but one thing that I think that we should consider when we talk about transit, and I want to echo what the chair was saying, part of the purpose of this meeting is to get a consensus before like 2 a.m. so we can all then, you know, go back and go through the line items and present alternatives to the mayor so that then she can add that to her change memo. I'm also concerned about the road work. My district, your district, and Commissioner Higgins' district, for many, many years, our development paid for roads all over Miami-Dade County. And now we have serious maintenance issues, right? You know, the three of us have roads that need resurfacing and haven't been milled or resurfaced 40, 50 years, right? You can only do so much with potholes. But the reality is that we also cover the greatest amount of driving on those roads, right? Because of where our areas are at. And one thing that we might want to consider as we look at potentially increasing the gas tax is to allocate that money to the roads. Because that makes sense. That is something that we can tell people like, hey, we're going to increase the gas tax, but we're going to use it to fix the roads. That makes sense to the user that pays for the gas, right? So just something to consider. That's not what's done in this budget, but that's something that I could explain, right? Because one of the main complaints that we get is about the potholes and about the poor state of the roads. And I really do think at some point we need to circle back and work on our impact fee districts because I don't think that they're equitable. One thing that's in this budget is an increase in tolls, and we're increasing the toll on the Rickenbacker and the Venetian. And we're using that money to pay down the debt for the repairs that we're making to those two bridges. That same vehicle could be used for parks. So if I have, for example, Crandon that people pay to park at, if for the parks that have parking, assuming that parking is being collected, that's a whole other assumption. Assuming that those parking fees are being collected, you could also direct the administration to use the funds that are generated at that parking, as part of that parking revenue for the maintenance and the work that needs to be done at that park, particularly for the capital plan. And that would make sense because you're directly tying it to the use and you're making the experience better because instead of delaying maintenance on those parks, you're using the revenue that the users are providing to provide a better service. So, and the same, I know we eliminated parking for Tropical Park. However, and I'm not for charging parking at Tropical Park. I know it's very polemic, but I do think there is an opportunity at the very front to do like a VIP parking. I think the people who want to park at the very front, I think you could make some money there from some of those yoga mamas who don't want to walk. Those are key parking spots there in the front. So I think there are, and again, use that money for the park services, right, and maintenance of those parks. In terms of Mr. Chairman, what you mentioned about Meals on Wheels and the return on investment, I think that there may be even some opportunities with our existing CBOs. When we've all been meeting with the CBOs, and one of the things that I've been talking to them is, what other things can you do? How can we stack your services? And I found several CBOs, Mita Kitchen being one of them, that they're doing community work, and in that process, they're making meals, and they are delivering it to people. And they're interested in participating in Meals on Wheels. So they could do several things. So when we put together a CBO kind of return on investment, there is the possibility of getting a CBO that is employing disabled people to do a particular task, and then at the same time that they're making the meals, and those meals are going to Meals on Wheels. So you do both things. You don't just have to do one. And I think that we can create a paradigm for that. I know that Commissioner Gilbert mentioned that the mayor has been working on a CBO framework. I think we could just pass a CBO framework. I think we just say, look, this is what the grant programs require. This is what we require for all CBOs. You know, ideally, there would be some other entity that would do that. But I think at this point, we just start doing it ourselves. And if someone wants to waive out of that, they need this board to waive out of it. And I think that at a minimum, that creates some accountability for us. And the water rates, happy to talk about water, but I was going to do that as part of the enterprise ones. I know Commissioner Garcia mentioned that. I was thinking if we don't have another special meeting to do that as part of my appropriations, we'll just as part of that meeting, go through all the enterprise fund, and then we'll deal with solid waste and water if anyone is interested, or if you want to give me another date, that would be fantastic. So that's what I got in response to questions. And we'll go back to Commissioner Gonzalez.
Right, Commissioner Gonzalez, you're recognized. And then from you, it's Commissioner Orbis, and then Bastien.
There's one thing.
All right, so. All right, we're gonna get to everybody. Everybody's gonna have a fair share. Commissioner Hardiman's has a lot to say, and Commissioner Steinberg's on a roll today, and Commissioner Gonzalez is about to speak now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate what you said earlier regarding UMSA because you and I have 100% UMSA. I actually have Miccosukee land on my in my district. So what I'm concerned with is the current allocation of fire and response time. So if I can please get Chief Ayala to come up just to get some clarifications, because
Good afternoon again. Ray Dadala, Fire Chief. Through the chair, Commissioner, one of the areas that we identified through Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, we conducted an analysis about 2 years ago, geographical locations that we found service gaps. We found 13 geographical areas, Miccosukee being one. We began discussions with Miccosukee leadership, along with the mayor's office for Miami-Dade County, and I could proudly say that 2 weeks ago, I had the discussion with the mayor's office. They've moved forward in agreement with placing a unit on Miccosukee Reservation. So now we're working on the process, we're working on the agreement. We're projecting for the summer of 26.
I appreciate that, and I just want to say on the record, you guys are doing a fantastic job. All our firefighters are doing a fantastic job, and I appreciate you guys coming out today.
Thank you, sir.
But specifically, when I asked the question about response time, I asked a similar question to the sheriff. I know you're going to know the answer to this. Is there like a national standard as far as response times goes for what the response time should be? Should there be an emergency relating to fire?
Yes, sir. So the NFPA is what usually governs the fire departments, and the standard for 1710, NFPA 1710, calls for a response to a fire within 5 minutes, and a response to a medical call. Response to a medical call within 5 minutes, and a response to a fire within 5 minutes and 20 seconds. That is what the industry standard is. It is very difficult, especially for a county as large as us, to achieve that, but we continue to chip away at the response times.
And I think you're doing a fantastic job, but we see what worries me here is, like, for example, there's a very important helicopter that we're going to be shifting how we're going to be funding that helicopter.
Yes, sir.
And what worries me is, what would we do with that money if we weren't using it on a helicopter? And I would assume, from watching interviews and meeting with the fire union, that it could be used, for example, for more units, among other things. And what I'm worried about is exactly what you just said. A county this large, if we don't have enough units, then I feel like that might affect our response time. And in your line of work, sir, and I know you know this, but in your line of work, a minute can mean a life, right? A second can mean a life. So where are we at right now? And I know that I know that the number was much higher, and I know that you guys have improved that number, but as far as our response time right now, where are we at? National standard is 5 minutes. Where are we at right now?
So we actually combine from the time that we get the call from 911. So basically, our dispatchers to the time we arrive, we're averaging overall between inside and outside the UDB structure fires at 6 minutes and 35 seconds, and medical calls at 7 minutes and 54 seconds.
6 minutes and 35 seconds. Can you just explain to me how that works? When does the clock start? Does the clock start when the person calls 911, or does the clock start when does the clock start?
So there's different discussions on it. The way that we've had the discussions with our accreditors, ISO. So one of the things that we track is from the time that MDFR, what we can control, because we cannot control the calls that are coming from the sheriff's office, but from what we can control from our dispatchers to the time we dispatch to the time we arrive, that's how we're tracking our calls. Now, we do also track, but right now we haven't received the information because we've determined that the information that's being extracted from the 911 calls was incorrect. We're working with Motorola, the sheriff's office, and our IT department, and we're hoping to have all those numbers within the next few days.
So I have numbers here from the fire union, and I kind of want to figure out if we can sort out the discrepancy, because I have numbers here from the fire union that are saying that our response time is closer to 9 minutes. Is there anyone from the fire union that could clarify that?
Name's William McAllister. I'm the president of the Miami-Dade Firefighters Union.
I was looking at numbers where, you folks are, and when I say you folks, I'm sure it's internal folks, are saying that our response time is currently closer to like 9. But, Chief Ayala is telling me today, and I feel reassured that we're at 6.5. How did you guys arrive at the 9 minute?
So I think the important thing that he alluded to was the call response times that the department is reporting at 7 minutes and change is from the time that the call is received from the sheriff's office, not from the person on their cell phone requesting help. I spoke to the sheriff earlier. That processing time from the time the call is placed